Imagine closing your eyes and drifting back, far away in time, back to a city that never truly slept, a city of marble, echoing footsteps, and the soft hum of 1,000 voices. The smell of fresh bread, the sound of fountains flowing, and the distant call of a street vendor. You are in Rome. The eternal city, the heart of the ancient world. And tonight we will wander slowly through its streets, not in a hurry, not in search of battles or emperors, but in search of something gentler. What it was like to live, to eat, to sleep, to dream in Rome during its golden age. This is history, but told softly, a history made for sleep. Introduction: the Golden Age of Rome, the time between the rise of Augustus in 27 BCE and the passing of Marcus Aurelius in 180 C. Historians call it the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. 200 years when the empire stretched wide from the deserts of Egypt to the misty hills of Britain, from the sands of North Africa to the forests of Germania. But tonight we will not march with armies, we will not count battles or debate politics. Instead, we will walk slowly, as if through a dream. We will visit homes and markets, listen to the chatter of ordinary people and notice the small details, the sound of sandals on stone, the crackle of oil lamps, the way sunlight played on marble columns. You are not a stranger here, Keir. You are part of this world now. Perhaps you are a traveller, arriving in the city for the first time. Perhaps you are a citizen, returning to your insula, your apartment above the crowded street. Or perhaps you are simply drifting, a quiet soul wandering through history. Surrey. So breathe slowly. Let the rhythm of ancient Rome guide you, and let us begin our journey. Chapter 1. The Eternal City. It is dawn in Rome. The first rays of sunlight touch the rooftops, and the city begins to stir. From your small window, you hear the clatter of wooden wheels on cobblestone. A cart passes below, loaded with baskets of vegetables, headed toward the market. The driver calls out softly to his mule, and the sound echoes down the narrow street. The air carries many scents: the warmth of baking bread, the sharpness of fish brought in from the Tiber. The faint sweetness of wine spilled the night before. Rome is alive, and it greets you with all its smells, all its sounds, all its textures. As you step outside, the stone beneath your sandals is cool from the night air. Your street is narrow, the walls of tall apartment buildings rising on either side. They lean toward each other, their wooden balconies almost touching, as if the buildings themselves whisper in the morning light. Neighbours are waking. A woman leans from a window, shaking out a blanket. A boy rushes down the stairs, carrying a small loaf of bread, eager to begin his errands. Somewhere nearby, a baker's oven roars, the crackle of fire blending with the murmur of voices, and above it all, the sky begins to brighten. You turn your eyes upward, past the tangled roofs, past the threads of smoke drifting lazily upward. And there it is. The great dome of the Capitoline Hill, the temples gleaming in sunlight, columns shining as though the gods themselves have brushed them with gold. Rome is vast. More than 1 million souls live here, a number so large it feels impossible. Streets twist and wind, some narrow and shaded, others wide and filled with noise. Statues stand at corners, honouring emperors and gods. Fountains bubble, offering water to any who pass. You walk slowly, joining the flow of the city. Vendors call out their wares: fresh olives, warm bread, fine cloth. The chorus rises and falls, a song that repeats every morning. Somewhere in the distance, a legion of soldiers marches, their footsteps steady, their armour gleaming in the sun. But here in your street, life is softer, gentler. Mothers call to children, a dog barks playfully. The smell of honey cakes drifts from a stall. This is Rome at its heart, not the Rome of emperors and wars, but the Rome of daily life. A living, breathing city, a place of routine and rhythm, and you are walking through it, one step at a time. It is early morning in Rome. The city breathes slowly, as if waking from a dream. The cobblestones are cool beneath the first light of dawn, and a faint mist lingers over the Tiber River, curling around its bridges like soft ribbons of smoke. From the narrow lanes of the Subura district, a rooster crows. The call echoes against the walls of crowded insulae, the tall apartment blocks where so many Romans live. One by one, shutters creak open. A woman leans out to shake the dust from a blanket. Children, still rubbing the sleep from their eyes, tumble down the staircases, sent to fetch water from the nearest fountain. The fountain is already busy. It is a simple basin, fed by the aqueducts that carry water from faraway hills into the heart of the city. The water is cool, tumbling endlessly into the marble bowl, and the sound of it is soothing, a steady whisper in the morning air. Women balance clay jars on their hips. An old man kneels to wash his hands. A little girl leans too far over the edge and giggles as the spray touches her nose. Quote as her nose. Everywhere in Rome, the fountains are alive, spreading the lifeblood of the city. If you close your eyes, you can hear the city's music begin. The sharp call of a fruit seller, apples, fresh apples from the countryside, the hollow clop of hooves on stone, the squeak of wooden wheels as carts roll past. And beneath it all, the murmur of voices, hundreds blending into one soft hum. Rome is enormous. Some say 1 million souls live here, slaves and citizens, merchants and magistrates, senators and beggars. In the early hours, they all share the same streets, drawn to the heart of the city. You follow the crowd slowly, your sandals tapping against stone worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. The air grows richer with smells: fresh bread from the baker's oven, fish from the river stalls, the tang of garlic sizzling in oil. Each scent lingers for a moment, then fades into the next. Soon the narrow lane opens, and you step into a wider street. Here the city feels grander. Tall colonnades line the road, their white marble still cool with night's shadow. Shops open beneath their arches. Cobblers arranging sandals, scribes sharpening their reeds, butchers hanging cuts of meat, and always there are statues. Statues at corners, statues in courtyards, statues in niches above doorways. Marble emperors stare with unblinking eyes. Bronze gods gleam where the light strikes. Even the crossroads have shrines, where travellers whisper quick prayers before continuing their journeys. You pause to watch. A mother places a small cake on a shrine, a gift for the household spirits, the lyres. Her son imitates her, dropping a crumb of bread with solemn pride. In Rome, the divine is everywhere. The gods live not only in great temples, but in kitchens, doorways, and streets. As the sun climbs higher, the city grows busier. Crowds swell at every corner. Senators in white togas stride toward the forum. Merchants push carts piled with grain. Street performers gather small audiences, playing pipes or balancing on their hands. A beggar rattles a wooden cup. A soldier polishes his breastplate until it shines. And through it all, the water flows. The aqueducts, high above the city, carry streams across arches that seem to touch the sky. They bring life from the mountains, clean, cool water, enough to feed fountains, baths, gardens, and the thirst of the endless crowd. If you lift your gaze, you can see one of these aqueducts stretching across the skyline. Its arches march steadily into the distance, a line of stone against the blue morning. The sight is calming, a reminder that beneath the city's noise there is order. Rome is restless, but also eternal. You continue walking. The ground slopes gently, and soon you are standing at the edge of the Forum, the great marketplace and meeting place of Rome. Here the air is alive with voices. Merchants call from every side, offering spices from the east, silks from distant China, ivory from Africa, amber from the cold seas of the north. The smells are dizzying. Frankincense burns at a stall, its smoke curling upward in silver spirals. A butcher swings his knife, cutting meat with practiced rhythm. A woman sells figs so ripe that their sweetness seems to float through the air. But beyond the noise of buying and selling, there is another sound, the voice of the city itself. Senators debate near the Senate House, their words flowing like the Tiber. A lawyer gestures passionately in front of a crowd. A poet recites a few lines to friends, his voice soft, his eyes half dreaming. The Forum is not only a marketplace, it is the memory of Rome, a place where marble speaks, where marble speaks. Temples rise on every side. The Temple of Saturn, the Temple of Vesta, the Temple of Castor and Pollux. Each has columns that stretch into the sky. Each gleams in the sunlight, each whispers the power of the gods. And yet, among this grandeur, life continues in simple ways. A child chases a dog between the pillars. Two friends argue over the price of olives. An old woman sets down her basket, rests her back against the cool stone, and closes her eyes for a moment. Rome is always both things at once, grand and ordinary, eternal and fleeting. It is a place of emperors, but also a place of bakers, gardeners, children, beggars, and lovers. And as you stand in the Forum, listening to its heartbeat, you realize this is the Golden Age. This is the city at its height. The Forum hums like a beehive, but as you wander away, the noise fades into the background like a distant tide. You walk toward the slope of the Palatine Hill, and from here the view opens wide. Above the rooftops of Rome, you see the long line of aqueducts stretching into the city. Stone arches, one after another, march across the horizon. They are steady, balanced, measured, each arch carrying the gift of water. the aqueducts are silent, but in their silence there is comfort. From mountains miles away, streams are guided down into the city, flowing with unbroken patience. Water runs through channels, through pipes, into fountains, into baths, into gardens where roses bloom and laurel trees whisper in the breeze. To the people of Rome, these aqueducts are more than stone and mortar. They are a promise that the city will never thirst, that its fountains will always sing, that the baths will always welcome, and the baths are waiting. Even at this hour, smoke rises from the chimneys of the great Thermae. The baths of Agrippa, the baths of Nero, and soon the vast baths of Caracalla and Diocletian, but even the smaller ones are grand. You step into one, and the warmth greets you immediately. Inside, the air is heavy with steam. Marble floors shine with drops of water. Men sit together on benches, their voices low and relaxed. Some play dice, their laughter echoing off the tiled walls. Others recline, their bodies slick with oil, while slaves scrape their skin clean with curved strigils. The sound of splashing water fills the chamber. One pool is warm, another cool, another so hot that the steam curls upward and fogs the painted ceiling. You sink into the warm pool, the water wrapping you like a blanket. Above, painted figures of nymphs and gods seem to watch from the ceiling, their eyes half hidden in mist. The baths are more than a place to wash. They are the living room of Rome, a place where strangers become friends, where business is whispered, where gossip travels faster than the Tiber's current. Here, the city relaxes, and you can almost forget its noise. When you step outside again, the sun is higher and the streets are bright. Vendors line the avenues, their stalls shaded by awnings of cloth. They sell figs and honey cakes, olive oil in clay jars, simple sandals of leather, trinkets of bronze and glass. Children dart between the stalls, their voices shrill with laughter. A man plays a reed pipe, his tune cheerful and light. Even the pigeons seem content, cooing as they hop between scattered crumbs. And yet, above this playful scene, the temples rise. Everywhere you look, columns reach into the sky. The temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline, its steps broad and shining. The temple of Vesta, where the eternal flame is guarded by the Vestal virgins. The temple of Apollo, with statues so perfect they seem alive. The temples are places of stillness. You step into one, and the city's noise is left behind. Inside, the air is cool, smelling faintly of incense and marble dust. The columns soar upward, their tops hidden in shadow. A priest moves silently, his white robes glowing in the half-light. He pours wine upon the altar, and the liquid glistens like blood before it disappears into the stone. A family kneels together, whispering their prayers. The father touches the altar, then the foreheads of his children. The mother lights a small lamp and places it with care among dozens of others. The flames flicker softly, tiny stars in the temple's gloom. Outside, the city waits. But here, for a moment, time slows. You breathe deeply, and the silence feels like a blessing. When you step back into the sunlight, Rome is loud again. A crowd gathers near a theatre. Posters, painted boards, announce a comedy to be performed that afternoon. Actors in masks will take the stage, their voices carrying over the clatter of the city. You can almost hear it already. The exaggerated tones of tragedy, the playful banter of farce. The theatres of Rome are vast. Stone tiers rise high, curving around a stage decorated with columns. The audience is restless, laughing, shouting, throwing nuts when the actors stumble. But for now, the theatre is quiet, waiting for its moment. And nearby, another building looms, the amphitheatre. You know its name, the Colosseum. Its arches tower above the streets, layer upon layer of stone, like the ribs of a giant beast. Inside, tens of thousands will gather. They will cheer, they will gasp. They will watch as men and beasts face each other in combat. But not today. Today the Colosseum rests. The great gates are closed, the arena silent. Sunlight spills across the empty seats, and a single bird glides above, its shadow touching the sand below. Even the Colosseum sleeps sometimes. You leave it behind and return to the hum of the streets. Rome's life is not only in its monuments, it is in its people, its endless crowd. A procession moves past, priests carrying statues of the gods, their chants rising in rhythm with their steps. Behind them come dancers, flutes, the steady beat of drums. The crowd cheers, throwing petals that float through the air like soft red snow. Elsewhere, a teacher gathers his pupils in a shaded corner. They sit cross-legged on the ground, their wax tablets resting on their knees. The teacher recites a line from Homer, and the boys repeat it in careful chorus. Their voices rise and fall, like waves upon the sea. Farther still, a craftsman hammers bronze into shape. The ring of his tool echoes down the alley sharp and steady. Across from him, a potter shapes clay upon his wheel, the vessel rising slowly beneath his hands. Each turn of the wheel, each stroke of the tool is a heartbeat of the city. Rome is never quiet. Even at its gentlest, it is alive with motion. And yet, as you walk, you feel no hurry. The flow of the crowd carries you, soft as a current, through temples, markets, fountains, and narrow lanes where laundry flutters in the breeze. It is all one song, the splash of water, the call of vendors, the murmur of prayers, the rhythm of hammers, the laughter of children. Rome sings to itself, and you are part of its music. The sun climbs higher, spilling golden light onto the city's stones. Every surface seems to glow. The marble temples gleam, the tiled roofs shimmer, and the statues look almost alive. Rome is a forest of stone, a forest that has grown not with leaves and branches, but with columns and arches and arches. You pause at the edge of a wide avenue. It is lined with colonnades, rows of tall, fluted pillars that march into the distance like an army of giants. Their shadows stripe the pavement, long and cool. Beneath them, shopkeepers set out their goods, silks in vivid colours, purple, crimson, emerald. Bronze lamps polished until they shine like fire, amphorae of oil and wine, their clay surfaces stamped with seals. Everywhere there is order, the straight lines of the road, the measured rhythm of the columns, the arches rising one after another, always balanced, always symmetrical. Roman architecture soothes the mind. It whispers of control, of harmony, of human hands shaping the world into patterns. And yet the city is never only marble and order. It is flesh and breath and hunger. The markets are proof of this. Follow the scent of spices and you arrive at a crowded square, so full of stalls that the air itself seems woven with smells and colours. Here are baskets of figs, dark purple and bursting with sweetness. Here are piles of olives, green and black, shiny with oil. Here is a butcher's stall, red with fresh cuts of meat, flies buzzing lazily above. Next to him, a seller of fish splashes water over his catch to keep them shining in the sun. The smell is sharp, sea salt and river mud mixed together. A spice merchant leans over his wares. His jars are filled with powders the colour of fire, saffron gold, cinnamon brown, pepper black as midnight. When he opens one, the air shivers with its strength, and passers-by turn their heads. For a moment, you feel as though you stand at the centre of the world. For here in Rome, the world has gathered. Fruit from Africa, grain from Egypt, wine from Gaul, pearls from India. All roads lead to Rome, and all goods flow into her markets. The crowd is thick. You move slowly, carried by its rhythm. A baker shouts the price of his loaves. Children beg their mothers for honey cakes. A pair of soldiers stand eating olives, their helmets tucked under their arms. The noise is constant, but never harsh. It is the noise of life, rich and layered, as comforting as a lullaby. At one stall, a woman sells roasted chickpeas. The smell is warm and nutty, the sound of crackling skins sharp in the air. Next to her, another vendor fries fish in oil, the sizzle filling the street like music. The taste is cheap, but to many it is a feast. You take a moment to breathe deeply. Bread and garlic, meat and honey, wine and herbs. The smells blend until you can no longer tell where one ends and another begins. It is the perfume of Rome, earthy and rich, a scent that clings to your memory. Beyond the stalls, the Tiber glitters. Its waters are not always clean, but they are alive. Barges drift along its surface, carrying grain, stone, timber and wine. Men shout from the banks, guiding ropes, hauling cargo. The sound of water slapping against the wooden hulls is steady, ancient, endlessly repeating. The river is more than a trade route. It is the spine of the city, its cool breath. Children play along its banks, skimming stones, dangling their feet in the shallows. Fishermen cast their nets, their silhouettes sharp against the sunlight. Couples sit together in the grass, their voices low, their laughter hidden beneath the rush of water. You stand upon one of the bridges, an arch of stone that has carried footsteps for centuries. Beneath you, the Tiber slides quietly. Above you, the sky is bright and endless. And for a moment, you feel weightless, caught between earth and heaven, between past and present, between the restless crowd and the calm of the flowing water. The river carries everything. It carries goods and people, hopes and burdens, memories and forgetfulness. It whispers to the city constantly, a voice too low for words, yet always there. Rome listens to it, whether she knows it or not. You turn from the river, and the streets welcome you again. Children race past, their feet slapping the stones. A dog barks, chasing after them. A group of men argue at a street corner, their gestures sharp, their voices passionate. Nearby, an old woman sells garlands of flowers, their petals soft and fragrant. She weaves them slowly, her fingers steady despite their age. Everywhere you look, Rome is both immense and intimate. The arches stretch to the sky, yet the baker smiles at a child. The temples stand in marble silence, yet the street singers lift their voices in joy. The aqueducts bring water across miles, yet a single drop runs cool across your fingers. This is the eternal city. Not only its grandeur, but its countless small moments. A father lifting his son onto his shoulders, a merchant carefully weighing out spices, a young woman adjusting her veil as she hurries past. Each detail is a thread, and together they weave the endless tapestry of Rome. The sun begins to sink, and Rome changes its skin. The brilliance of midday softens, the sharp edges of stone blur in the golden glow. Shadows grow longer, stretching across the cobbled streets like gentle fingers. You walk slowly, and the rhythm of the city slows with you. The markets grow quieter. Vendors gather their wares, folding cloths, stacking baskets, counting coins with tired but satisfied hands. The smells of garlic, wine, and roasted meat linger in the air, but fainter now, as if carried away by the cooling breeze. From a balcony, a woman waters her plants. Drops of moisture fall to the street below, catching the fading sunlight like sparks before vanishing. Children return home, their laughter still ringing, though softer, already slipping into memory. The lamps are being lit. At first, one or two flicker, tiny flames in clay bowls. Then more appear along doorways, in shops at corners where the streets cross. The oil burns with a faint hiss, casting halos of warm light. The city seems to sigh, a deep, slow exhale as day folds into night. Taverns come alive. Behind low wooden doors, voices rise in song and cheer. The smell of wine thickens the air, mixed with stew bubbling in blackened pots. You step inside one. The floor is worn, the walls smoke darkened, but the room is alive with warmth. Men sit shoulder to shoulder at rough wooden tables. Some drink from clay cups, others from bronze. A musician plucks at a lyre in the corner, his tune soft, half lost beneath the laughter. Two men argue cheerfully about the races, their voices competing with the song. A slave weaves through the crowd, carrying a tray of steaming bread. The tavern is rough, but it is the heartbeat of ordinary Rome. Hoy! Outside, the streets are glowing. The lamps sway gently in the breeze, their flames steady, their shadows dancing against the walls. A cart rolls past slowly, its wheels creaking, its driver humming to himself. From a window above, someone pours water into the gutter, and it splashes quietly onto the stones. Farther down the street, a small group of musicians gathers. They play pipes and drums, their music light and playful. Children clap along, and a few passers-by stop to watch. And to what? The tune is simple, but it weaves into the night air, carrying with it the laughter of strangers. Rome at night is never silent. The city has too many voices, too many lives awake at every hour. Yet its noise is softer now, less hurried, less sharp. It is the murmur of conversation, the soft ring of footsteps, the hush of distant water. The chaos of the day has melted into something gentler. You wander toward the river once more. The Tiber reflects the lamps, its surface broken with shimmering gold. Boats rest against the banks, their sails furled, their ropes tied fast. A fisherman sits quietly, his line trailing into the dark water. Beside him, a dog sleeps, its chest rising and falling in rhythm with the current. Across the water, the silhouette of the city glows faintly. Temples rise like guardians, their columns pale against the night sky. A breeze carries the faint scent of smoke, mixed with the sweetness of flowers, still blooming in hidden courtyards. As the night deepens, the streets empty. The taverns remain alive, their laughter spilling into the dark, but elsewhere the city rests. A baker kneads dough for the morning. A watchman walks his slow patrol, the iron of his spear tip catching the light. Cats move silently along the walls, their shadows quick and sleek. Above, the stars reveal themselves. One by one they pierce the sky, until the heavens seem a mirror of the lamps below. Rome is lit by two worlds at once, the eternal sky and the fleeting glow of human hands. You pause in the quiet. Somewhere, faintly, a woman sings to her child. Her lullaby drifts through an open window, soft and timeless. It mingles with the city's breathing, with the murmur of the Tiber, with the sigh of the wind as it brushes through tiled roofs and marble columns. This is Rome at night, still vast, still eternal, but wrapped now in gentleness. It is a city that never truly sleeps, and yet in these hours it feels dreamlike, as though time itself has slowed, and the marble city floats quietly between day and dawn. And you, walking its lantern-lit streets, feel the rhythm of it settle deep within you. The day has ended. The city is resting, The city is resting, and you are part of its dream. Step now from the busy streets of Rome into the spaces where people live. The city may be grand, filled with temples and marble arches, but behind the public facades, life unfolds in quiet corners. Here, families gather. Here, families gather. Here, bread is broken, lamps are lit, and sleep eventually comes. There are two kinds of homes in Rome, two faces of the city's private life. The first is the insula, the tall, narrow apartment blocks that rise along crowded streets. Most Romans live here, in rooms stacked one upon another, where neighbours share walls and voices drift easily through thin partitions. The second is the domus, the townhouse of the wealthier classes. Set back from the noise of the road, with walls enclosing hidden courtyards, the domus is both private and proud, a world of its own behind heavy doors. Let us pause before the entrance. The street outside hums with life, but the threshold marks a change. Stone steps lead to a doorway framed by columns. The wood of the door is dark, bronze hinges gleam faintly, and above it hangs a charm, perhaps a painted image of a protective spirit. A slave might stand waiting here, ready to open the door to guests. Cross this point, and the city is left behind. What waits inside is different. A world enclosed, a place of family, of order, of ritual. Step into the atrium, the heart of the Roman house. The floor beneath you is stone, polished smooth by years of footsteps. Above, the roof opens to the sky, a square cut away to let in air and light. Beneath this opening sits the impluvium, a shallow pool lined with marble. Raindrops fall into it, leaving ripples that shimmer gently in the quiet air. The sound of water is soft, a constant murmur in the house. Here, the family greets visitors. Here, ancestors are honoured. Shelves hold wax masks of those long gone, faces carved with lines of memory. Oil lamps burn in front of small shrines. The air smells faintly of smoke and resin, of flowers offered in clay bowls. It is a space both public and private, a place where the household's dignity is quietly displayed. Beyond the atrium lie rooms, each with its own rhythm, its own place in the day. But the atrium is the first breath of the home. It feels timeless, as though stepping here you have left the restless city and entered a slower pulse of life. Now imagine another home, the insula, rising high above the street. Here the doorway is narrow, the stairs steep and worn. The walls are plain, sometimes cracked. Inside, the rooms are smaller, the ceilings lower, the air thick with a scent of cooking smoke. Families crowd together, each with a space no larger than a single room. Windows open to the street, letting in noise and dust. The floor creaks beneath every step. It is not grand, but it is alive with voices, with neighbours calling to one another, with the smells of bread baking in shared ovens. This too is Rome. The poor and the middle classes live stacked in these tall houses, their lives entwined. Above the clamour of the tavern below, children sleep on straw mats, their dreams mingling with the laughter from the street. Two worlds, the domus with its marble pools and open sky, the insula with its crowded walls and thin windows. Together, they form the beating heart of the city's homes. Step further inside. The atrium rests behind us now, its quiet pool reflecting the open sky. Ahead lie corridors and thresholds, each leading to a different chamber, each with its own rhythm, its own whisper of life. The atrium, once more, though we are moving past it, the atrium deserves another glance. In the day it is filled with light, the sky above framed like a painting, clouds drifting slowly overhead. At night, lamps glow around its edges, casting reflections across the pool. The voices of guests echo here, their sandals clicking against stone. Children run across the floor, their laughter rising into the open roof. It is a stage for the life of the household, a place where the family is seen. But beyond this space, more private chambers wait. The atrium may greet the world, but the rest of the house is where the world is set aside. The triclinium, where meals unfold, step into the triclinium, the dining room of the Roman home. Here, the air smells of roasted meats, of herbs crushed in stone mortars, of wine poured into bronze cups. The word itself tells its shape. A try for three, a cline for couches. 3 couches rest in a U-shape, low and cushioned, their wooden frames carved with delicate patterns. Guests recline here, leaning on their left elbows, reaching with their right hands for platters placed on the low central table. Meals are not hurried. They stretch slowly into the evening, each course arriving with care. Olives glisten in bowls, cheese crumbles across bread. Dishes of fish, pork, or fowl follow, seasoned with sauces rich in spice and salt, and always there is wine, mixed with water, sometimes sweetened with honey, sometimes spiced with herbs. The walls are painted with colour. The walls are painted with colour. Reds and golds swirl into patterns, images of gods or of landscapes beyond Rome's borders. By lamplight, the paintings seem alive, their figures shifting with the flicker of flame. Voices here are softer. The clamour of the street cannot reach these walls. Instead, there is laughter, conversation drifting like smoke, and sometimes music. A flute, a lyre, a singer's voice rising gently into the rafters. The triclinium is not only a place to eat, it is where bonds are made, friendships renewed, alliances whispered in the pause between courses. It is a place of ritual, of hospitality, of the slow weaving of social life. The cubicular. Chambers of rest now step into the cubicular. The small sleeping rooms tucked along corridors. They are not grand. Their walls are plain, their floors simple, but they are quiet, and they are private, In one, a bed rests against the wall. A wooden frame, ropes stretched tight to hold a mattress of straw. Blankets of wool are folded neatly, and a small chest holds clothing, perhaps jewellery, perhaps keepsakes. The air here is cooler. Lamps are dim, their light softening every edge. A child might sleep curled against a pillow, a doll of rags in her arms. A mother might sit nearby, humming as she spins thread on a small spindle. The cubicular are places of pause. They hold the unspoken hours, the hours between the clamour of day and the return of dawn. Here dreams settle. Here, silence gathers. Not all rooms are for sleep alone. Some cubicula serve as studies, with scrolls stacked on wooden shelves, wax tablets resting on low tables. By lamplight, a man may write here, his stylus scratching softly against wax, his thoughts drifting beyond the walls of the house. The culina, the kitchen, is smaller than you might expect. It is often tucked into a corner, walls darkened with smoke, air heavy with the scent of oil and spice. A hearth of stone glows faintly, its coals smouldering beneath iron pans. Hooks hang from beams, holding pots, pans and ladles blackened with use. On the floor rests a basket of onions, another of garlic, their sharp scent filling the air. Nearby, clay jars store olive oil, wine, grain and fish sauce so strong its aroma lingers everywhere. Slaves move quickly here, their hands skilled, their rhythm practiced. They grind grain in a heavy millstone, pound herbs in a mortar, stir stews that bubble and hiss. The kitchen is alive with movement, though hidden from the eyes of guests. And yet, despite its plainness, this small room sustains the life of the house. Every flavour that lingers in the triclinium, every comfort enjoyed at the table, is born here in fire and smoke. Corridors and doorways between these rooms stretch narrow corridors, lit by small lamps, their stone floors worn by countless steps. Doorways open onto sudden courtyards, where a fig tree might grow, its leaves broad and green, its fruit sweet in the summer heat. Light filters in through small openings, casting long stripes across the walls. Everywhere the air feels slower, cooler, protected from the restless noise outside. The Roman home is not vast, not endless, but it feels like a world enclosed. Each room hums with its own purpose, each chamber holds its own secrets. Together, they create a rhythm of life, steady and timeless. When you walk through them slowly, in the quiet of thought, you begin to feel the pulse of the household itself. It is not the grandeur of temples, not the bustle of the forum. It is something gentler. It is the still heart that beats beneath the marble city. Life inside a Roman house is not just stone and wood. It is made of people, of voices, of the small and steady rituals that shape every day. The family at the centre, at the heart of the domus, stands the paterfamilias, the father, the oldest male of the household. No. His authority is deep, woven not only by custom but by law. His word carries weight, his decisions ripple through the walls of the home. Yet his presence is not always stern. In the early mornings you might find him seated in the atrium, scrolls spread before him, dictating letters to a scribe or listening to clients who come seeking advice. In the evenings he may recline in the triclinium, sharing wine with friends, listening to his children recite verses from poets. Beside him stands the mater familias, the mother, keeper of the home's rhythm. She oversees the slaves, ensures the household's order, guides the weaving of cloth, the preparation of meals, the offerings left at shrines. Her hands move constantly, whether spinning wool, arranging flowers, or tracing the brow of a child. Her role is quiet, but her influence is everywhere, woven into the very fabric of the house. Children bring laughter. They play in courtyards, chasing one another between columns, their sandals slapping against stone. A boy practices writing his letters on a wax tablet, his stylus scratching carefully while his tutor corrects him. A girl sings softly to her doll, its face painted. its body stuffed with rags. In their voices, the weight of the household softens. The slaves who sustain the house, every Roman home depends upon slaves. They are invisible in grand histories, but here, in the domus, their presence is constant. One tends the lamps, trimming wicks, filling bowls with oil so that the glow never fades. Another kneels in the kitchen, pounding herbs into pastes, her arms moving with practiced rhythm. A boy runs through corridors, carrying messages or water, his bare feet light against the floor. Some serve quietly in the background. Others stand near their masters, ready with a cup of wine, a towel, a word of greeting for guests. They clean, they repair, they fetch, they tend. Their lives are not their own, yet they shape the very flow of life inside the home. The clink of their tools, the rustle of their sandals, the murmur of their voices, all form the unseen hum beneath the household's music. Meals and the ritual of eating the Roman home is alive with food, not just for survival, but as a rhythm of the day. In the mornings the meal is light, bread dipped in wine, perhaps olives, perhaps cheese. It is taken quickly, standing or sitting in small groups, before the day's duties call. Midday brings more. Simple dishes of vegetables, lentils, bread thick with oil. Children gather here, their chatter bright as they eat. But the evening is the true ritual. The cena, the great meal of the day, is when the family reclines in the triclinium, when guests are welcomed, when the home becomes a stage of taste and conversation. The courses arrive one by one. First the starters, eggs, perhaps oysters, salads sprinkled with herbs. Then richer dishes, meat stews, fish baked with spices, game birds roasted to perfection. Finally, sweets, honey cakes, fruits, nuts dusted with salt. Wine flows throughout, its sweetness deepened with honey, its sharpness softened with water. The slaves move silently, bringing trays, filling cups, removing plates. The paterfamilias speaks with his guests. Children listen with wide eyes. Laughter rises like smoke, lingering in the air. Rituals and shrines, no Roman home is without its gods. In the corners of the atrium, or in small alcoves, stand the lauraria, shrines to the household spirits. Little figures made of clay or bronze stand within them, arms outstretched, frozen in gesture. Offerings rest at their feet, bowls of fruit, crumbs of bread, drops of wine poured with care. Every morning the household gathers to give thanks. A prayer is whispered, a flame kindled, smoke curls gently upward, filling the air with the scent of resin. The family's ancestors are present here too, their images kept in wax, their memory honoured with garlands. They are not forgotten. They walk silently beside the living, woven into every ritual, every act of remembrance. These shrines, though small, hold immense weight. They are the soul of the house, the thread that ties it to the past and binds it to the favour of the divine. Decorations and beauty, though life is practical, Romans love beauty. Their homes reflect it quietly. Floors are laid with mosaics, tiny stones arranged in patterns, geometric shapes, waves of colour, scenes of animals or myth. Step across them and the images seem to ripple beneath your feet. Walls bloom with painted frescoes. In some rooms, gardens stretch across plaster. Green leaves, bright flowers, birds perched among vines. In others, myths unfold, gods and heroes captured in vivid motion, their faces glowing in pigments of red, blue and gold. Bronze lamps gleam on tables. Clay vessels hold flowers, their scent drifting through corridors. The house is not only a shelter, it is a canvas. It speaks of taste, of wealth, of the quiet joy of surrounding life with beauty. Gardens within walls step into the peristyle, the hidden garden at the heart of the domus. Columns rise in neat rows, enclosing a square of earth open to the sky. Here, vines climb trellises, roses bloom in the warm air. A fountain sings softly, its water falling into a shallow basin. Children chase one another through the paths. The mistress of the house gathers herbs. A slave waters the plants, his clay jar glistening with droplets. It is quiet here, a pocket of peace within the city. The noise of Rome does not intrude. Only the rustle of leaves, the murmur of water, the songs of birds nesting in the rafters. The garden is not just decoration. It is sanctuary. It is breath. It is the reminder that even in the marble city, the earth still blooms, still gives, still holds life in gentle abundance. The Roman home in all its corners is more than stone. It is voices, rituals, food, and beauty. It is both public and private, both ordered and alive. And as you walk slowly through it, listening to its whispers, you begin to feel not just the shape of a house, but the soul of a family. Evening settles slowly upon the Roman house. The sun drifts lower, its light softening into gold, then deepening into rose, then fading into the dusky blue of twilight. The day's work has ended. The city beyond the walls hums with taverns and streets, but inside the domus a different rhythm begins. Quieter, gentler, like a heartbeat slowing after exertion. Lamps and shadows slaves move through the corridors, lighting lamps one by one. Each lamp is small, a clay or bronze vessel filled with oil, its wick glowing steadily. They place them in niches on tables in corners where shadows gather. The flicker of flame casts shapes against the walls, patterns that seem to move like figures alive in the frescoes. The soft hiss of burning oil is the only sound for a moment, until laughter drifts from the triclinium, where the evening meal is drawing to its close. The atrium glows in half-light. The pool in the centre mirrors the lamps, its surface trembling with golden sparks. The open sky above shows the first star, a silver pin against the velvet dark. Quiet conversations after the meal. Guests may linger in the triclinium. Cups of wine rest in their hands, their voices low now, their words meandering like the smoke from incense burned in a small brazier. The paterfamilias leans back, his laughter softer, his tone more thoughtful. The materfamilias sits beside him, her eyes attentive, her hand resting lightly on the rim of her cup. They speak of family, of the harvest, of omens seen in the sky. Sometimes they recite a line of poetry, or tell a story passed from memory. Children, sleepy-eyed, sit cross-legged on the floor, listening. Their heads grow heavy, their lids droop, until a nurse lifts them gently and carries them toward the cubicular. The stillness of the chambers in the sleeping rooms, lamps burn low, their light golden and faint. The beds are simple, blankets drawn, pillows arranged. A mother hums to her child, her lullaby weaving softly through the hush of the night. It is not a song of grandeur, but of comfort, of the small daily hope that tomorrow will dawn kind. In another chamber, a boy lies awake, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts wandering beyond the walls of Rome, to the games he will play, to the lessons he must recite, to the mysteries of the stars that now twinkle faintly above the opening of the atrium. Sleep will claim him soon, but for a moment he lingers in the quiet wonder of youth. The work that continues not everyone rests at once. In the kitchen, a slave scrubs pots, the water sloshing quietly in the basin. Another kneads dough for the morning bread, her hands moving rhythmically in the dim glow. In the courtyard, a servant tends the garden by moonlight, pulling herbs for medicine, checking the water in the fountain. Their movements are silent, practiced, part of the night's hidden labour. The household breathes because of them, even when its masters sleep. Music in the night sometimes, a lyre is brought out after supper. Its strings are plucked gently, a melody drifting into the night air. The song is soft, not meant for performance but for the soul's quiet ease. A guest hums along. Another taps a finger against the couch. The tune fades, lingers, then returns again, as if it belongs not only to the players but to the house itself. The sound floats upward through the open atrium, out into the Roman sky, where it mingles with the murmur of distant streets and the whisper of the Tiber flowing beyond the walls. Rome drifts into night outside the domus, the insulae hum with different sounds. In one room, a mother hushes her children to sleep while neighbours argue through thin walls. In another, a man plays dice by lamplight, the clatter echoing into the corridor. From below, the tavern spills its laughter into the street, its lamps glowing late into the night. But within the domus, silence deepens. The peristyle garden glimmers under the moon, dew beginning to gather on the leaves. The fountain sings quietly to itself, a lullaby of falling water. Cats slink through the shadows, their eyes flashing briefly in the lamplight before vanishing again. The paterfamilias retires to his chamber. The materfamilias follows, her footsteps soft across the mosaic floor. The last lamps are dimmed. The house exhales. The breath of night, now the Roman home sleeps. Its walls hold stories. Its rooms cradle dreams. The shrines watch silently, lamps burning faintly before the household gods. The ancestors seem close in these hours, their presence warm and steady, as if they too walk the corridors guarding those within. Outside, the city still stirs, but here in this domus, night has woven its spell. It is the same night that drapes itself over all of Rome, the same stars that shine on emperors and beggars alike. And yet here it feels personal, intimate, a quiet blessing. You pause in the atrium one last time. The pool mirrors the moon. The air is cool, still, filled only with the sigh of sleeping walls. You close your eyes, you listen, and the house, gentle and eternal, lulls you into rest. The city of Rome wakes gently, though its heart has never fully slept. The streets still hold the echo of carts that rattled long after dusk, the taverns that spilled their laughter into the night, and the whispers of the river Tiber, flowing steadily as it always has, but now the light returns. The first glow of dawn slips over the tiled rooftops, touching the marble of temples, the columns of porticos, the quiet statues that have watched centuries of mornings rise. And within the domus, the citizen stirs and stirs. Today will be like many others, a rhythm of duties, work, leisure, and ritual, and yet each day carries its own quiet character, its own scents, sounds, its own small stories written into the flow of life. The paterfamilias is often the first to rise, stepping into the cool air of the atrium, where the impluvium glimmers faintly with the reflection of dawn. He pauses before the household shrine, the laurarium, offering a pinch of incense, a prayer murmured not in grand oration, but in the intimate voice of habit, the kind that is repeated so often it becomes woven into the soul. Elsewhere in the house, slaves already move quietly, preparing bread, sweeping floors, readying water from the cistern. The rustle of fabric, the scrape of sandals on the mosaic floor, the crackle of fire being coaxed awake. These are the subtle notes of the Roman household's morning song. Beyond the threshold, the city itself is also stirring. Vendors wheel their carts into place along the main roads. The smell of baking bread drifts from small ovens tucked into side streets. The faint bray of a donkey echoes down an alley, answered by the call of a seller of figs, his voice cutting through the cool air. Rome never waits long to be busy again. For the Roman citizen, the day unfolds in patterns both structured and flexible. There is work to be done for some. It is the business of politics or law for others, the shop or the stall for many, the endless small labours that keep the city alive. There are rituals of status to maintain, greetings exchanged in the forum, patrons receiving their clients, the weaving of obligations and favours that form the invisible net of Roman society. There is also leisure to seek, for a life lived entirely in labour would not be considered truly Roman. The baths, the theatres, the colonnades, all beckon as places where body and spirit may find their ease, and woven through it all is the pulse of family life, the meals shared, the children taught, the stories passed from one generation to the next. Morning is a time of motion, but not of haste. A Roman citizen steps into the day not with frantic urgency, but with a sense of order. As though the city itself expects to be greeted, its stones and streets ready to receive the footsteps of its people. So let us walk alongside, through the hours of this golden day, and see what it was truly like to live in Rome, not as emperor or general, but as the citizen whose life was made of both the ordinary and the eternal. The Roman morning begins with footsteps upon stone. Sandals press against the mosaic floor of the atrium, then carry their wear out the door, into streets where the light of dawn has just begun to soften the edges of the marble facades. The air is cool still, but filled with the promise of the day's bustle. The paterfamilias, draped in his toga if the occasion requires, pauses briefly at the threshold of his domus. There is meaning even in this, the crossing from private to public space, from the intimacy of the household gods to the wide stage of Roman society. His clients will be waiting. This ritual of patron and client is as old as the Republic itself, a thread woven into the fabric of citizenship. Outside along the street, men gather respectfully, their togas simpler, their eyes attentive. They are clients, less wealthy, often dependent, looking to their patron for support, advice, or opportunity. The greeting is formal but warm. Each man approaches, grasping the patron's hand, offering words of loyalty. The patron responds with a nod, sometimes a promise, sometimes merely the weight of his presence. In return for his guidance, they will lend their voices to his causes, their loyalty to his reputation, their small but steady support to the great wheel of politics and honour. This morning salutatio is brief, yet essential. It is not a grand spectacle, but a quiet reinforcement of ties, the invisible cords that bind Rome's society together. And then the group moves toward the forum. Streets open gradually, from the narrow alleys near the insulae to the wide, sunlit spaces that lead to Rome's beating civic heart. Vendors are already calling, their voices lively in the morning air. The smell of bread, just pulled from ovens, mingles with the sharper tang of olives, the sweetness of figs, the salt of fish laid out on wooden stalls. Children run barefoot, weaving between carts and donkeys, their laughter quick and bright. The closer one draws to the forum, the more the city seems to swell. Columns rise, arches frame the sky, statues gaze with calm authority. The paving stones bear the weight of thousands of feet, citizens, foreigners, slaves, soldiers, all threading their paths through this living stage. For the Roman citizen, the forum is not merely a place of business, it is the soul of the city. Here, Politics unfolds in public, speeches echo beneath porticos, petitions are made, disputes resolved. Here, too, merchants spread their wares, scribes set up their tables, philosophers gather small crowds with their words. The patron leads his clients through these spaces, stopping to greet acquaintances, listening to a case, sometimes settling a dispute with a quiet word. Each encounter adds to his honour, each decision shapes his reputation. Elsewhere in the forum, a magistrate lifts his voice, calling for order as citizens gather to hear a proclamation. The sound rolls across the marble square, mingling with the cries of vendors, the clatter of carts, the low murmur of endless conversation. It is busy, yet not frantic. Rome thrives on this rhythm, a steady hum of voices, the measured steps of men with purpose, the sense that even in chaos order is always being woven. As the sun climbs higher, the forum glows more brightly, its marble surfaces dazzling in the light. The statues of ancestors, heroes and gods stand steady, reminders of Rome's past and its eternal destiny. Citizens shade their eyes, adjusting their togas, leaning into the business of the day. Some will remain here for hours, arguing cases, negotiating deals, seeking favour from senators or magistrates. Others will move outward, toward their workshops, their shops, their trades. But always the morning begins with this. The pulse of Rome felt most strongly in its civic heart, the forum alive with the presence of its people. And when a Roman citizen has walked here, spoken here, shaken hands beneath the colonnades, he feels himself anchored not only to the day, but to the city itself, as though Rome and its citizen breathe together, step together, live together in the shared rhythm of morning. By late morning the sun has climbed higher, its light spilling across rooftops, warming the marble, brightening the painted walls of shops and porticos. The cool breath of dawn has vanished. In its place, the air hums with energy, and with the warmth that will only deepen as noon approaches. The forum still stirs with its political heartbeat, but many citizens drift outward now, into the broader streets, where the markets and workshops call. Here begins the midday rhythm of Rome, the busy, practical pulse that sustains the vast city. Workshops and craftsmen down narrow lanes, the sound of hammers striking bronze rings steadily. Smiths bend over their anvils, faces streaked with soot, shaping tools, ornaments, locks, hinges, the countless small objects that make daily life possible. From another corner comes the scent of wood shavings, where carpenters plane planks into tables, chests, or door frames. Their shops are simple, open to the street, so that passers-by may pause to watch, to haggle, to order. The potter's quarter glows with the heat of kilns. Stacks of amphorae wait in neat rows, their pointed bases ready to be packed with oil, with wine, with grain. The potter's hands are rough, their movements quick and practiced. A spinning wheel, a vessel shaped in minutes. Each craft is humble in itself, yet together they form the body of the city. Without them, Rome could not breathe. Markets in full swing by midday, the markets are crowded. Stalls line the streets, overflowing with goods. The air is thick with smells, sweet honey cakes, sharp vinegar, the salt of curing fish, the freshness of herbs tied in bundles. One seller lifts a basket of figs, their skins split with ripeness, calling out his price. Another slices cheese, placing wedges into the hands of eager customers. There are olives, green, black, wrinkled, smooth, gleaming with oil in clay bowls. Garlic hangs in braids, bright peppers are strung like garlands, and baskets of bread, round and crusted, send their fragrance into the hot air. Shoppers move slowly through the press. Women lift fabrics to the light, testing their colour. Men argue cheerfully with vendors, their voices rising and falling like music. Children dart between legs, snatching dates or nuts when no one is looking. Above it all, the cries of hawkers fill the street, each voice competing, each sound a note in Rome's midday chorus. Food stalls and street meals not every citizen eats at home. For many, the quick meal is taken at a thermopolium, a street-side food stall. Stone counters curve outward to the street, their sunken jars filled with hot stews, with beans, with seasoned meats. For seasoned meats. A man leans across, accepting a bowl ladled fresh, the steam rising into the bright day. Here the smells are rich, savoury, clinging to the air. The tang of garum, Rome's beloved fish sauce, mingles with the sharpness of vinegar, the sweetness of honey cakes cooling on trays. Men stand in clusters, cups of watered wine in hand, chewing bread, exchanging gossip. It is noisy, informal, alive. The poor eat here most often, but even a senator may pause at such a stall if the mood strikes him. Food, after all, is not only nourishment, it is part of the shared breath of the city. Leisure in the heat as the sun climbs higher. Its warmth presses heavily on the stones. Shadows shorten, and the streets shimmer faintly. Some citizens seek shade beneath colonnades, where cool marble offers relief. Others retreat indoors to rest in the dim quiet of their atriums, but not all is still. Children continue to play in the streets, their games simple yet spirited. Knucklebones tossed into the dust, hoops rolled with sticks, shouts and laughter ringing clear. In one corner of the forum, a philosopher gathers a small audience. His voice rises and falls, discussing virtue, fate, the proper way to live. Some nod in agreement, others smile with skepticism, but all linger, for words, too, are part of Rome's leisure. At another end, a group of men roll dice in the shadow of a column. The clatter of ivory cubes is followed by groans, then bursts of laughter. Coins change hands swiftly, as fortune shifts with every throw. Rome's leisure is not always noble nor always solemn. It is human earthly, woven into the fabric of daily life. The river's breath by midday, the Tiber also plays its role. Along its banks, barges unload goods brought from distant lands. Amphoria carried on strong shoulders, grain is heaved in sacks. The bustle of trade never ceases. The river smells faintly of mud and salt, its surface glittering under the sun. Children splash at its edges, their laughter mingling with the grunts of labourers. Fishermen mend their nets in the shade, their hands moving slowly, rhythmically. The Tiber is not just a river. It is a living artery, a source of water, of transport, of life itself. Even in the hottest hours, its presence cools the city, a reminder of Rome's bond with nature, even in its grandeur of stone. The pause before afternoon as noon approaches, the city holds its breath for a moment. Shadows lie directly beneath colonnades, the stones of the streets too hot to touch. Merchants wipe sweat from their brows. Citizens fan themselves with the edges of their cloaks. The hum of voices softens. Soon the rhythm will change again. The baths will beckon, inviting the citizen to wash away the dust of labour. The quieter hours of afternoon will arrive, filled with conversation, with learning, with the slower flow of the day. But for now, Rome glows with its midday fullness, the city alive with trade, with work, with laughter, with the heartbeat of ordinary life. The heat of midday begins to soften. Shadows stretch longer across the stones, and the golden light of afternoon falls gently upon Rome. The city exhales as though it has carried its burden of labour and now seeks rest. For many citizens, this is the hour of the baths. The Thermae welcome them with cool marble halls, the splash of fountains, the sound of laughter and voices echoing beneath vaulted ceilings. Here the citizen may shed the dust of the forum, the sweat of the workshop, the weight of the day. Slaves carry oil and towels. The bather steps first into the tepidarium, a warm chamber, the air heavy with steam. His skin begins to loosen, his body sighs with relief. Then into the caldarium, where heat envelops him fully, sweat beads on his forehead, the pores of his skin drink the warmth. Finally, a plunge into the frigidarium, the cold water closing around him like a fresh embrace. He emerges renewed, his spirit light, his body free. The baths are more than cleansing. They are a place of talk, of politics, of gossip. Men lean on the benches, discussing the news of the day, debating philosophy, whispering rumours of senators and generals. Children splash, merchants strike deals, friends greet each other with smiles. The baths are Rome's second forum, less formal, but no less alive. When the sun begins its descent, citizens drift toward the theatres, toward the arenas, toward the taverns where laughter grows louder as lamps are lit. Some stop at a street corner, listening to a musician pluck his lyre, or watching a juggler toss coloured balls into the fading light. The city shifts into evening, vibrant still, yet gentler than the blaze of day. In homes, the main meal unfolds. Tables are set with bread, cheese, bowls of olives, platters of roasted meat. Wine is poured, diluted with water, passed from hand to hand. Family gathers. Children chatter. The paterfamilias speaks of his day, the materfamilias listens, her eyes watchful, her voice steady. Guests may recline on couches, the air filled with conversation, with laughter, with the warmth of company. As twilight deepens, lamps are lit one by one. Up one. Flames tremble in bronze and clay vessels, casting long shadows upon painted walls. Frescoes seem to stir in the flickering glow, their figures alive for a moment before sinking back into stillness. Outside, the streets hum with evening sounds. Taverns spill music and cheer into the alleys. Dice clatter on wooden tables, cups of wine ring against each other. The scent of spiced meat and warm bread drifts into the night air. Children laugh, dogs bark, voices rise and fall like the tide. Yet even as the taverns shout, the city's quieter spaces breathe calm. In a garden, a fountain murmurs to itself. Moonlight touches the leaves of laurels, the petals of roses. In the peristyle, a woman sits quietly, her spindle in hand, her gaze lost in the silver sky above. Gradually, the city yields to night. The forum grows empty, its marble gleaming faintly beneath the stars. The Tiber reflects the moon, its dark current carrying whispers of distant lands. Torches gutter low along the streets. The voices of the taverns fade, replaced by the hush of sleep. Inside the domus, the family retires. Slaves dim the lamps, the atrium grows still, the lararium glows faintly before the household gods. In the cubicula, children lie curled beneath blankets, dreaming of games, of stories of adventures beyond the city walls. Parents murmur softly in their chamber, their words fading into silence. Rome itself seems to sigh. Its stones cool in the night air, its colonnades rest beneath the watch of the stars. The city that never truly sleeps gives itself for a few hours to stillness. It is the stillness of a giant at rest, a heartbeat slowed, yet always present. And so the Roman day ends, with the glow of lamps fading, the hush of streets growing quiet, the eternal city cradled in night. Another morning will come, another rhythm will begin, but for now, Rome dreams. The city of Rome wakes not only to labour and duty, but also to the promise of spectacle. Its people, whether senators in gleaming togas or children running barefoot through the streets, share a hunger for wonder, for sights and sounds that lift them beyond the ordinary rhythm of daily life. For in Rome, entertainment is not a small diversion. It is a force woven deeply into the soul of the city. It fills its amphitheatres and arenas, its circuses and theatres, its streets during festivals that seem to shake the very stones. It binds rich and poor together, for all may gather to watch, to cheer, to feel the thrill of belonging to something vast. The morning light of a festival day carries a different energy. Streets bustle more quickly, faces shine with anticipation. Vendors ready their baskets of figs and bread to sell to the crowds. Children clutch at their parents' hands, pulling eagerly toward the great buildings where today's entertainments will unfold. In the distance, the Colosseum looms, its arches stacked like the layers of a dream, its stones already alive with murmurs. Or perhaps the Circus Maximus calls, its vast track stretching between Palatine and Aventine hills, waiting for the thunder of horses and chariots. Or else the smaller theatres hum with preparations, actors rehearsing their lines, musicians tuning their lyres, costumes glittering faintly in the sun. Everywhere the same feeling spreads. Today is not an ordinary day. Today, Rome will entertain. The citizen moves with the crowd, his sandals tapping in rhythm with hundreds of others. The air smells of dust, of fresh bread carried in baskets, of oil lamps already prepared for the night. Voices mingle, laughter rises, and with each step the anticipation grows. There will be cheers, there will be music, there will be silence broken suddenly by the roar of the crowd. There will be victories, triumphs, and spectacles so grand that even centuries later they linger in memory. For Rome is never more alive, never more itself than when its people gather to watch, to celebrate, to surrender to the magic of spectacle. And so, as the sun climbs higher and the gates of the arenas and theatres swing open, let us step inside and see what it was like to be part of this ancient world of wonder. The Colosseum rises like a mountain of stone, its great arches catching the sun, its tiers of seating curving in perfect circles. It is said that 50,000 souls could fit within its embrace, their voices mingling into a single thunder when the games began. For the Romans, this amphitheatre was not just a building. It was the beating heart of spectacle, the stage upon which courage and fate were tested. To step through its gates was to enter a world where life and death played out beneath the eyes of thousands, where history itself seemed to pause and watch. The morning of a gladiatorial day began early. Crowds lined the streets long before the doors opened, flowing like streams toward the Colosseum. Vendors cried out their offerings, dates wrapped in leaves, flatbreads still warm from the oven, clay cups of watered wine to keep the thirst at bay. Children darted through the throng, their laughter ringing against the marble walls. Old men argued about who would win the first bout, their voices rising like a chorus above the crowd. Inside, the amphitheatre was a marvel of order. Marble seats gleamed, arranged carefully by rank and class. At the lowest tiers, closest to the sand, sat senators and nobles, their togas crisp and white, their jewels glinting in the sun. Above them gathered the equestrians, merchants, and men of wealth. Higher still sat the ordinary citizens, their tunics plain, their faces alight with anticipation. And at the very top, in the lofty reaches of the amphitheatre, sat women, foreigners and slaves, all still part of the great body of spectators, all joined in the same roar of approval or dismay. The emperor's box stood at one end, draped in silks, guarded by soldiers. When he arrived, the people rose, cheering with such force that the stone itself seemed to vibrate. For though the games belonged to all, they were also gifts of the emperor, a display of generosity, a way to show the people that their ruler cared for their joy. The sand of the arena stretched wide and golden, smoothly raked, prepared for the day's events. Beneath it, hidden from view, lay a labyrinth of chambers and passages. Here, gladiators waited in the dimness, their armour polished, their hearts steadying. Here too were cages of wild beasts, lions pacing, leopards crouching, bears breathing heavily in the dark. At a signal, great lifts and pulleys could raise them suddenly to the surface, unleashing surprise upon the crowd. The machinery clanked softly below, ready to serve the spectacle above. The games began with a kind of ceremony. Trumpets blared, their notes echoing against the stone. Officials processed across the sand, their robes trailing dust. Sometimes exotic animals were paraded first. Elephants, giraffes, creatures brought from the farthest edges of the empire, a display of Rome's power and reach. The crowd gasped, children pointed, and the wonder of distant lands seemed to come alive before their eyes. Then came the opening contests, lighter bouts to stir the audience, perhaps a mock naval battle, if the arena had been flooded with water, or hunters, armed with spears, facing swift deer or boars. Dust rose, shouts rang out, the day quickened in spirit. At last the gladiators entered. Their armour gleamed, their helmets catching the sun. They were pairs of opposites, the heavy Mirmillo with broad shield and sword facing the nimble Retiarius with net and trident. The 3X with curved blade set against the Hoplomachus with spear. Each match was chosen for contrast, for the drama of difference. The crowd leaned forward, hearts quickening. Some cheered for one, some for the other. Bets were whispered, coins exchanged beneath the folds of tunics. The signal was given, and the combat began. Sand kicked up under swift feet. Shields clashed, swords struck, nets spun through the air. The crowd roared with each blow, each narrow escape. When a fighter stumbled, thousands of voices gasped as one. When a blow landed, cheers burst forth like thunder. And yet, for all the violence, there was also ritual. Gladiators were trained not only to fight, but to fight with style, to show courage, to make the struggle into a kind of performance. Their movements were art as well as survival, their gestures shaped for the eyes of the crowd. Sometimes a fighter was defeated but not slain. He would raise his hand appealing for mercy. Then the crowds decided, thumbs raised or turned, shouts of a spare him or a strike him down. The emperor too might give the final signal, his gesture sealing the man's fate. In those moments, life and death hung on the will of the multitude, and the Colosseum trembled with the weight of decision. The sun moved across the sky, casting shifting shadows on the sand. Hour by hour, match by match, the people remained enthralled. Their voices never tired, their eyes never strayed from the spectacle, for here, in this place, they were part of something vast, something eternal. As the day wore on, the dust grew thicker, the air heavier with sweat and oil. But the energy did not fade. If anything, it deepened as the greatest contests approached, the ones all had come to see. And in the roar of the Colosseum, in the cries of victory and despair, Rome itself seemed to breathe. The Circus Maximus stretched wide and endless, a ribbon of sand nestled between the Aventine and Palatine hills. It was not just a track, but a valley turned into a theatre of speed, a place where Rome's love of horses and spectacle unfolded on a scale unlike any other. Here, more than 200,000 spectators could gather, an ocean of faces, a chorus of voices, all focused on the narrow oval where chariots would fly. From a distance, you could hear it before you saw it, the swell of the crowd, the blare of trumpets, the excited chatter of gamblers and fans. For chariot racing was more than entertainment. It was passion, politics, fervour. It divided the people into factions, each with its colours. The blues, the greens, the reds and the whites and the white. These teams were more than sport. They were tribes of loyalty, shaping friendships and rivalries across the city. A man might wear the colour of his team on his cloak, might argue heatedly with his neighbour over victories past, might even fight in the streets to defend the honour of the faction he loved. On race day, the circus was alive from the earliest hours. Vendors lined the approach, selling honey cakes, roasted nuts, jugs of wine mixed with water. Fortune tellers promised lucky charms, claiming they could ensure victory if only you bought their amulet. Children clutched wooden toy chariots, their wheels painted bright, their strings pulled as if already racing. The air smelled of dust and excitement, of horses being led to their stalls, of sweat and anticipation mingled together. Inside, the seats rose tier upon tier, marble and wood stretching far into the sky. At the centre of the track ran the spina, the long dividing barrier adorned with statues, obelisks, shrines to gods who might watch over the races. Along it stood the turning posts, sharp and narrow, where the chariots would pivot in dangerous arcs. It was here, at the corners, that skill and fate met most fiercely, where wheels might crash, horses might stumble, and glory might dissolve into dust. The emperor's box overlooked it all, draped in rich cloth, surrounded by guards. When the emperor raised his hand, the vast crowd hushed, like a sea stilled before the storm. A small white cloth, the mappa, was dropped into the air, and the race began. The gates flew open. Chariots burst forth, horses surging with power, their manes streaming, their hooves pounding the earth like drums. Dust rose instantly, a golden cloud swirling in the morning sun. The crowd erupted, a roar so great it seemed to shake the very hills. The charioteers stood tall, lean and fierce, their hands gripping the reins wrapped tightly around their waists. Each wore the colours of his faction, bright tunics whipping in the wind. Their faces were set with determination, their eyes fixed on the path ahead. They leaned into the turns, their bodies straining, their whips cracking through the air. Around and around they thundered, 7 laps of the long oval, each one a test of endurance and daring. At the turns the crowd leaned forward, hearts quickening. Would the wheels scrape the posts? Would a horse stumble? Would fortune favour boldness or punish recklessness? Crashes, what the Romans called naufragia shipwrecks, were part of the danger and part of the thrill. A wheel might splinter, a chariot might overturn, hurling its driver into the sand. Horses tangled, dust flying, the crowd gasping with both horror and delight. For every fall was tragedy, but also spectacle, and the race pressed on regardless. Bets changed hands swiftly, coins clinking in the shadows of the stands. Cries of a blue, 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 clashed with shouts of a green, green, as fans urged their favourites forward. The rivalry was fierce, sometimes spilling beyond the track into riots in the city streets. For to lose was not merely to see another team triumph, it was to feel your own honour diminished, your pride wounded. Yet when a charioteer triumphed, the glory was immense. He might be showered with wreaths, with purses heavy with gold. His name would be shouted across Rome, his fame spreading beyond the city's walls. Some charioteers rose from humble birth to dazzling wealth and influence, their victories making them heroes to the people who adored them. The dust thickened as the laps drew to a close. The crowd's roar rose higher, voices straining to be heard. The final stretch came, horses galloping at full strength, charioteers urging them on, the whips cracking with desperate energy. In a blur of motion, the finish line was crossed, the victor raising his whip in triumph. The stands exploded in celebration, a wave of sound like thunder rolling across the valley. And then, as the dust slowly settled, as the defeated limped from the track, as the victor made his circuit of honour, the energy softened. People stretched, voices fell into murmurs, the race complete, but the memory lingering, for the Circus Maximus was more than sport. More than sport. It was the pulse of the city, a place where rich and poor sat side by side, where politics mingled with passion, where the noise of the crowd was the very heartbeat of Rome. And as the sun drifted higher into the sky, as the next race was prepared, the city's people remained restless, hungry for the next thunder of hooves, the next chance to cheer, to gasp, to feel alive in the spectacle of speed. When the dust of the circus settled and the roar of the Colosseum faded into silence, another kind of spectacle awaited the people of Rome. Not all entertainment thundered with hooves or rang with the clash of swords. Some lived in music and poetry, in masks and costumes, in laughter that echoed through the open air. The theatres of Rome, built of stone and wood, curved wide and welcoming, their tiers of seats stretched upward, embracing the stage where actors performed tales both old and new. The scent of oil lamps and fresh rushes floated on the evening air. Crowds gathered eagerly, their chatter filling the spaces until the musicians struck the opening notes. Comedy was loved most of all. With painted masks and exaggerated gestures, actors played out farcical stories of greedy merchants, boastful soldiers, clever slaves, and foolish lovers. The people laughed easily, for these were stories that mirrored their own lives, only brighter, louder, made ridiculous by performance. Laughter spilled from tier to tier, rolling through the audience like a tide, until even the sternest senators smiled in spite of themselves. There was tragedy too, echoes of the Greeks woven into Roman voices. Heroes undone by fate, gods weighing heavy on mortal shoulders. The silence that fell during these plays was deep and reverent, the audience caught in the web of words, feeling sorrow that was shared, yet strangely sweet. Between the acts, musicians played, the soft pluck of the lyre, the trembling notes of flutes, the rhythmic beat of drums. Dancers swirled, their costumes glittering with gold thread, their movements weaving patterns in the firelight. Children clapped, old men nodded in time, and the city breathed together, bound in the music of the moment. And beyond the theatres, Rome itself became a stage during festivals. For the calendar of the Roman year was filled with days of celebration, when daily work gave way to feasting, games, and ritual. The Saturnalia was the brightest of these, a festival of reversal, of joy and abandon. For a week in December, masters served their slaves, gifts were exchanged, houses were decorated with greenery, and laughter rang through the streets. Tables overflowed with food, cups with wine, songs with merriment. Even the poorest found cheer, for in those days the weight of hierarchy lifted, and Rome seemed to dance with freedom. Other festivals honoured gods and goddesses, the Floralia with its blossoms, the Lupercalia with its wild rites, the solemn days of Jupiter and Mars. The city pulsed with processions, priests in white robes, sacrifices offered at smoky altars, crowds following with song and prayer. Flowers were strewn on the steps of temples, incense curled into the air, and music wound through the streets, a river of sound carrying the people forward. On such days Rome transformed. Its markets overflowed with colour, garlands, ribbons, painted masks. Jugglers performed on street corners, their torches flashing in the sun. Musicians gathered at crossroads, their flutes and drums competing joyfully. Children ran with streamers, their voices shrill with delight. The air smelled of roasted meats, of honey cakes baked fresh, of spilled wine soaking into the dust. And when night descended, the city did not fall into silence. Torches lit the streets, casting golden halos on the stones. Taverns filled with song, their doors open wide, spilling laughter and music into the dark. Dancers twirled in firelight, shadows leaping along the walls. Couples whispered in the corners, friends clasped hands across tables, and the hum of festivity lingered until dawn's first glow. The festivals were not only pleasure, they were binding threads of community, moments when every citizen, rich or poor, senator or slave, felt part of something vast, something ancient, something divine. And so the circle of Roman entertainment closed, from the thunder of the arena to the laughter of the theatre, from the fury of the races to the joy of the festivals. Rome lived in spectacle, and in spectacle Rome found itself. As the lamps burned low and the crowds at last drifted homeward, the city fell into a softer hum, the stones warm from the day's energy, the air still sweet with incense and wine. And in that gentle quiet, Rome rested, only to wake again to another day of wonder. Religion in Rome was not separate from life. It was life. The city itself seemed to breathe with divinity, its streets lined with shrines, its hills crowned with temples, its people moving through days marked by rituals both grand and small. To walk through Rome in its golden age was to feel the presence of the gods at every turn. They watched from marble pediments, from carved altars darkened with smoke, from the quiet corners of kitchens where tiny household shrines glowed with flame. They were guardians of doorways, protectors of hearths, lords of harvest and war, keepers of river and sky. The Roman world did not imagine one god alone, but many, woven together like threads in a tapestry. Each had their domain, their story, their honour. And to live in Rome was to know that each act, from the humblest meal to the grandest triumph, rested under divine eyes. Temples rose like jewels upon the city's hills. The great Capitoline Hill gleamed with the temple of Jupiter, Optimus Maximus, its columns tall and white, its roof bright with terracotta tiles. Here, Jupiter was worshipped as king of gods and men, the protector of Rome itself. Beside him stood Juno, guardian of women and marriage, and Minerva, goddess of wisdom and craft. The three together formed the Capitoline Triad, a trinity of power and protection, whose temple crowned the city like a crown of light. When festivals to Jupiter were held, the temple came alive. Priests in long robes prepared the sacrifices, their hands washed, their voices chanting hymns. The people gathered on the wide steps, bringing offerings of flowers and incense, bread and wine. The air grew thick with smoke, the scent of roasted meat and burning herbs rising toward the heavens. Trumpets blared, their notes rolling across the forum below. The crowd lifted their hands, calling the name of Jupiter, their voices mingling in a single prayer for strength, for prosperity, for Rome's eternal favour. Elsewhere, other temples called the faithful. On the Aventine Hill stood the temple of Diana, goddess of the hunt, guardian of the moon, protector of women in childbirth. Her temple was said to be a place where all could come, Romans, allies, strangers, to find sanctuary beneath her gaze. Here the air was quieter, the rituals gentler, but the sense of holiness no less deep. Across the city rose the temple of Venus, goddess of love and beauty, patroness of the Julian family. Her festivals were filled with music and flowers, with laughter and song, with garlands wound into hair and perfumes wafting through the air. For Venus reminded the Romans that life was not only duty and war, but also love, softness and delight. The temple of Mars thundered with another energy. Here, soldiers came before campaigns, sacrificing bulls or rams, seeking strength and courage. The clang of weapons sometimes echoed in its courtyard, a reminder that Rome's greatness was born of both piety and steel. And scattered everywhere were smaller shrines, dedicated to gods of doorways, of crossroads, of fields and fountains. The lyres watched over households, the penates guarded pantries. Janus opened each beginning, with his two faces looking forward and back. No corner of life was untouched. No moment was outside the divine. Rituals filled the Roman calendar. The year turned not only with the seasons, but with the rhythm of holy days. There were days for sowing, days for harvest, days for honouring ancestors, days for cleansing the city of ill fortune. Each festival was a thread in the great tapestry, binding the people together, reminding them that their lives were part of something greater. Take, for instance, the festival of the Parentalia, 9 days in February, when families honoured the spirits of the dead. Graves were decorated with flowers, offerings of wine and bread were laid, families gathered in quiet remembrance. The city itself grew still, its officials pausing in respect, its people turning inward to memory. The past was not forgotten, but welcomed, woven into the present like an eternal companion. Or the Vestalia in June, when the temple of Vesta opened its doors and matrons came barefoot, bringing offerings to the goddess of the hearth. Her sacred fire burned without end, tended by the Vestal virgins, whose duty it was to keep Rome's flame alive. If ever that fire went out, it was said the city itself was in danger. And so, in the soft glow of Vesta's temple, Rome's heartbeat glimmered, quiet but enduring. The rituals could be vast and public, or small and private. A man leaving for a journey might pause at a shrine to Janus, whispering a prayer for safe passage. A woman baking bread might sprinkle a pinch of flour at her household altar, a gift to the penates who guarded her pantry. Children grew up knowing that every act could be sacred, every corner of life watched by unseen eyes. Thus religion in Rome was not a burden, but a rhythm. It guided the steps of the people, shaped the days of the city, and gave meaning to triumph and sorrow alike. For Rome's greatness did not rest on stone alone, but on faith. Faith that the gods watched, that the gods cared, that the gods cared, that the gods and the city were bound together forever. If Rome's temples rose like mountains of marble above the city, its true religious heart often pulsed in quieter places. Behind closed doors in shaded courtyards and small alcoves, Romans kept their gods near, not distant figures on lofty pedestals, but companions at the hearth, guardians of the pantry, spirits of doorway and threshold. Every household, no matter how humble, kept a laurarium, a small shrine, often in a niche in the wall or on a decorated pedestal near the hearth. Here the lyres were honoured, protective spirits of the family and home. Sometimes painted in fresco, they appeared as dancing figures in tunics, raising drinking horns in celebration, symbols of joy and life preserved. Beside them stood the penates, spirits who guarded the pantry, ensuring that grain and oil, wine and salt, were never lacking. The daily rhythm of devotion was gentle but constant. At dawn, before setting out for work or the forum, a Roman father might pause before the laurarium, offering a libation of wine, a pinch of salt, a crumb of bread. He would whisper a prayer for the safety of his household, for the success of the day ahead. Children, watching carefully, learned these motions by heart, absorbing the lesson that life itself was sacred, and that no step should be taken without a word to the gods. Festivals, too, had their echoes at home. During Saturnalia in December, when the city erupted in feasts and revelry, families decorated their shrines with garlands, poured extra offerings, and lit lamps deep into the night. At the Parentalia in February, they visited family tombs but also left food and wine at the laurarium, calling upon the spirits of their ancestors to share in the warmth of the living home. Even the kitchen fire had a spirit. Vesta, goddess of the hearth, lived in every flame. Her presence was not only in the great temple tended by the Vestal Virgins, but in the humblest cooking fire. When a new household was founded, a spark from an old flame might be carried to kindle the new hearth, a thread of continuity, a promise that the family's fire, like the city's, would never die. Rituals could be small, but they were never careless. Even dropping food on the floor was not without meaning. One might set it aside, a gift to the household gods, lest ill fortune arise. Every corner of the home had its spirit, every act its sacred shadow. Beyond the home, the Romans sought guidance from the unseen. Augurs read the will of the gods in the flight of birds. Standing on hills or open fields, they marked out a sacred space in the sky, dividing it into regions. If an eagle soared where good omens were expected, it was taken as approval. If a raven croaked in the wrong place, the gods were thought displeased. No great state decision, war, treaties, elections, was undertaken without such signs. But augury was not only public. Private men, too, might watch the birds, seeking patterns in their flight before a journey or a marriage. The sky was a book, and the gods wrote in feathers and wings. Haruspices, priests skilled in divination, read the entrails of sacrificed animals. The sheen of a liver, the markings of veins, the shape of a heart, all carried messages. It may seem strange to us now, but to the Romans, the body of a sacrifice was a tablet of divine will, to be read as carefully as any scroll. Dreams, too, were thought sacred. A restless night, a strange vision, a voice calling in sleep, these were not dismissed but taken to interpreters who unravelled their meanings. The gods spoke not only in thunder and flame, but in the quiet chambers of the mind. Private devotion also embraced mystery cults. In small candlelit gatherings, Romans might worship gods not native to their land: Isis from Egypt, Mithras from Persia, Cybele, the Great Mother from Phrygia. These cults offered personal salvation, rituals of initiation, a promise of life beyond death. Unlike the civic religion which bound the community, the mystery religions touched the heart. They spread in whispers, their ceremonies kept secret, their initiates bound together by oaths and shared visions. Yet even with such diversity, the Roman spirit remained practical. Religion was never distant philosophy, but living habit. It was woven into meals and markets, battles and weddings, births and funerals. It gave form to joy, a voice to grief, and dignity to the most ordinary of days. To live as a Roman was to walk always in a sacred landscape. The threshold of a door, the corner of a field, the flame in a lamp, the flutter of wings above, all were touched by gods. The world itself was a temple, and every act within it a prayer. Life in Rome was not all duty and ritual, not all marble columns and political debates. Beneath the clamour of the forum and the weight of empire, the Romans cherished their hours of ease. For what is life, they believed, without leisure to sweeten labour, without pleasure to give meaning to toil? The city itself seemed designed to weave enjoyment into every day. The streets brimmed with food stalls, bakeries fragrant with fresh loaves, inns offering steaming stews, taverns where wine flowed as freely as talk. Public fountains gurgled with clean water, their basins inviting passers-by to pause and drink. And tucked into neighbourhoods, quiet courtyards bloomed with herbs and flowers, offering shade and stillness in the heart of the restless city. For the Roman, leisure did not mean idleness, but rather the cultivation of life's sweeter arts. A morning might end with a visit to the baths, that grand invention where body and spirit alike found refreshment. The air would echo with laughter, with splashes, with the hiss of hot water meeting cool stone. There, friends met not only to wash, but to talk, to linger, to savour the company of others. Meals, too, were occasions for pleasure. Even the humblest supper of bread, olives and cheese was taken with a sense of ritual, a slowing of time, and for the wealthy, banquets stretched into long evenings, each course arriving like a story, each cup of wine deepening the music of conversation. Pleasure also lived in the garden. Roman homes, when fortune allowed, opened onto green courtyards where fountains splashed softly and laurel trees swayed in the breeze. Here, shaded benches waited, flowers scented the air, and one could read, write, or dream while the world outside buzzed with its ceaseless energy. But perhaps the truest Roman leisure was found in conversation itself. The spoken word, woven with wit, philosophy, or gentle teasing, was a form of art. Friends strolled colonnades, sat beneath painted porticos, or reclined after supper, their voices flowing as smoothly as the Tiber at dusk. In such moments, life itself became a pleasure to be savoured. So we step now into this softer landscape where the empire's grandeur fades and the small joys of daily life shine quietly. Here, in food and baths, in gardens and words, we see Rome at rest, the Rome that knew not only how to conquer, but how to live. If you wish to feel Rome with all your senses, there is no better way than to follow the path of its food. From the earliest hours of the morning, the markets awaken, noisy, fragrant, alive with colour. Vendors shout their prices in voices roughened by years, each eager to catch the ear of passers-by. Fishmongers display gleaming catches from the Tiber or from distant coasts of the Mediterranean, flounder, mullet, tuna, laid upon beds of crushed ice or cool, wet reeds. The air smells sharp with brine, salt mingling with the freshness of river water. Nearby, butchers hang cuts of meat on hooks, their knives flashing as they work swiftly. Fat sizzles on small braziers, and customers pause to taste a morsel, to judge the quality before they buy. The sound of hammers on cleavers mingles with the calls of fruit sellers. And what fruit theirs! Golden figs, clusters of grapes heavy with sweetness, bright oranges and lemons brought from warmer coasts, pomegranates splitting open to reveal their jewelled hearts. Stalls overflow with melons and pears, their perfumes drifting through the crowd. Children dart in and out, their hands sticky from stolen bites, their laughter adding to the chorus of voices. The vegetable sellers, too, offer baskets of cabbages, beans, onions, and herbs bundled neatly. Thyme, mint, rosemary, basil, ready to flavour soups and sauces. Olives, glistening dark or green, spill from amphorae, their oil pressed fresh nearby to be poured into clay jars and carried home. Each sound and smell blends into a music of the market. The clatter of pottery, the creak of wooden carts, the bleating of goats tied nearby, and above it all, the bargaining, the endless dance of buyer and seller, a game as old as Rome itself. When the housewife returns from the market, her kitchen becomes its own theatre. The hearth glows, pots bubble with stews of lentils or chickpeas, and flatbreads bake on heated stones. The air fills with steam and spice. In wealthier homes, slaves prepare more elaborate dishes. Honey-glazed dormies, oysters drizzled with garum, pheasant roasted with figs. The recipes blend the flavours of empire. African peppers, Egyptian grain, Greek herbs, all carried to Rome by merchant ships. The act of eating itself was never only about filling the stomach. It was ritual. The morning meal, intaculum, was simple: bread, olives, cheese, perhaps dried fruit. Midday brought prandium, a light refreshment taken quickly, often standing in the midst of business or labour. But the evening meal, cena, was the crown of the day. Here Romans lingered. Here pleasure and leisure unfolded slowly like the petals of a flower at dusk. For the wealthy, cena was a spectacle of its own. Guests reclined on couches in the triclinium, arranged in threes, while slaves served course after course. First came appetizers, eggs, olives, salads, accompanied by mulsum, wine sweetened with honey. Then fish, roasted meats, spiced vegetables, dishes designed to surprise the palate. Sauces thick with herbs and garum transformed simple flavours into feasts. Between courses there was music, a flute, a lyre, or the soft voice of a singer. Lamps glowed, their light glinting on bronze vessels and the silver of serving plates. Laughter rose, conversation flowed, and the feast became as much about words as about food. For humbler households, there was no triclinium, no endless courses, no discourse. But there was bread, sometimes dipped in oil, sometimes sprinkled with herbs. There were lentils, beans, porridge, perhaps a piece of pork or fish if the family could afford it. And always there was the companionship of eating together, the shared warmth of a simple meal. To dine in Rome was to participate in life itself. Each crumb, each sip, each murmur of conversation was part of a larger harmony, a music of nourishment, of community, of joy found in the ordinary rhythms of the table. And as the meal ended, a final libation might be poured, a small drop of wine to the gods, a silent thanks for the plenty of the day. Thus the Romans ate not only with their mouths, but with their spirits, knowing that each meal was both a gift and a celebration. As the sun climbs and the morning's bustle softens into slower hours, Rome turns to its gentler pleasures. The forum quiets, the markets thin, and men and women alike look toward those places where the body might be refreshed, the spirit soothed, and leisure savoured as an art. Foremost among these are the baths. To call them mere washing places would be to miss their essence. The Roman baths were worlds unto themselves, temples of water and air, where marble and steam met in harmony, where business, friendship, and relaxation all mingled together. The grandest of them, such as the baths of Caracalla or Diocletian, spread across acres of land. Approaching them, one would see columns rising like a forest of stone, porticos adorned with mosaics, gardens filled with statues of gods and heroes. Within lay vast halls, their ceilings arched and coffered, their floors patterned in coloured marble. The sound of water was everywhere, flowing, splashing, trickling down carved fountains. The ritual unfolded slowly. First, the apoditerium, the changing room, where sandals were set aside and garments folded or entrusted to slaves. Then the palaestra, the open court for exercise, where men boxed with leather thongs, wrestled on the sand, or cast the discus beneath the open sky. Sweat and laughter filled the air, for exertion was seen as a prelude to cleansing. From there, the bather moved to the tepidarium, the warm room, where the body grew accustomed to heat. The air shimmered with warmth, and conversation echoed in low tones, voices softened by the chamber's acoustics. Next came the caldarium, the hot room where steam rose in thick clouds and the heat pressed close upon the skin. Here pores opened and sweat poured, carrying with it the burdens of the day. At last the frigidarium, a plunge into cold water, shocking yet exhilarating. The body emerged renewed, tingling with vitality. Many lingered afterward in porticos or libraries attached to the baths, where scrolls awaited curious minds and shaded benches invited quiet's talk. Thus the baths were not only for cleansing, but for community. They were theatres of leisure, where the citizen could meet his patron, a philosopher might teach, or two old friends could while away hours speaking of politics, poetry, or the weather. From the baths, one might retreat to a garden, another sanctuary of leisure. Roman gardens, whether sprawling estates or modest courtyards, were shaped as carefully as poems. Paths wound through hedges of boxwood, fountains splashed softly into pools, and statues gleamed in dappled light. Laurel and cypress framed shaded corners, while roses spilt their fragrance into the air. In smaller homes, an hortus might offer only a few potted plants, a fig tree, a vine climbing a wall, but even these carried their own tranquillity. It was here that Romans found stillness. A man might sit with a scroll, unrolling lines of Virgil or Horace, or simply close his eyes and let the murmuring fountain become his companion. Children played at the edges, chasing butterflies or floating leaves on water. Women tended herbs, plucking mint or thyme for evening meals. The garden was at once retreat and hearth, a living room under the open sky. The afternoon stretched in languid rhythm. Some dozed in shaded chambers, their couches cool beneath woven cloth. Others strolled shaded porticos, speaking in measured tones. The city itself seemed to slow, as though even Rome's restless heart needed to breathe, to linger, to taste the sweetness of time unhurried. As the sun begins its slow descent, the golden light stretches across the rooftops of Rome, turning tiles to fire and marble to honey. The noise of the day softens. The clatter of carts grows distant, the cries of merchants fade, and the air cools gently, carrying the fragrance of cooking fires and the faint salt of the nearby sea. Evening in Rome is not only an end, but a transformation. The city, so loud in its mornings, so bustling in its afternoons, slips into a quieter rhythm, a softer heartbeat. In homes, lamps are lit, small clay vessels filled with oil, their wicks flickering into steady flame. One by one, courtyards glow, porticos shimmer with light, and the streets take on a golden dotted trail as if the stars have descended to live among the Romans. Supper has been eaten, and now leisure takes a gentler shape. In the houses of the wealthy, the evening stretches long. Musicians enter with lyres, flutes, or soft drums, their melodies drifting like incense. Dancers sway with slow grace, their shadows rising and falling on painted walls. Guests recline on couches, their wine diluted with water, their voices carrying in waves of laughter and philosophy. A witty remark sparks laughter. A line of poetry is recited, and conversation becomes its own performance, playful, thoughtful, woven as intricately as the mosaics beneath their feet. For the humbler families, the evening is no less rich in spirit. Children gather at their parents' knees to hear stories, tales of Romulus and Remus, of Hercules and his labours, of Jupiter hurling thunderbolts across the heavens. Neighbours step out into the streets, sharing figs or roasted nuts, their talk easy, their laughter rising into the night air. A singer might be heard from a nearby tavern, his voice carrying through the narrow alleys, mingling with the clink of cups and the shuffle of dice upon wooden tables. In every corner of the city, music flows. It might be the hum of a slave girl as she tends the kitchen fire, or the solemn chant of priests as they light torches in a temple. It might be the rhythmic beat of feet on cobblestones, a group of revellers returning from a festival, torches swaying in their hands. Rome is never silent, but in the evening its sounds become softer, dreamlike, as though the city itself is breathing more slowly. Gardens, too, hold their charm at dusk. Oil lamps flicker among vines, casting gentle shadows across fountains. Friends stroll slowly along shaded paths, the scent of roses mixing with the cool of night air. Here, the talk is not of politics or duty, but of the stars, of dreams, of the fleeting sweetness of life. A cup of wine in hand, a cool breeze upon the skin, this too is Rome, and when night deepens fully, the city seems to exhale. Children sleep beneath woolen blankets, their dreams echoing the tales heard at twilight. Lamps burn low in homes, casting small halos of gold upon walls. Taverns close one by one, their last songs fading into the dark. The streets grow still, save for the distant bark of a dog or the whisper of the Tiber sliding endlessly beneath the bridges. Thus the day in Rome comes gently to its rest. Not with silence, but with softness. With music fading, with voices calming, with the glow of lamps drawing the vast, restless city into a tender embrace of sleep. Rome, for all its marble temples and golden banquets, was held together by labour. Behind every gleaming arch, every aqueduct rising across the hills, every loaf of bread steaming in the marketplace, there were hands, calloused, strong, weary, yet tireless in their rhythm. Work in Rome wore many faces. It was the blacksmith, his hammer sparking against iron in a dim workshop. It was the farmer, guiding his plough through the dark soil at dawn. It was the soldier, marching with steady tread beneath the weight of armour and sun. It was the slave, carrying heavy jars of water, bending over fields not his own. And yet, even within toil, there was rhythm, a kind of music that bound Rome together. The clang of hammers in the forum mingled with the calls of street vendors. The lowing of cattle outside the city walls echoed the shouts of builders on scaffolds. From countryside to metropolis, from legionary camp to patrician villa, Rome's life pulsed through the work of its people. Craftsmen carved, masons built, scribes bent over wax tablets, fishermen cast their nets into morning waters. Every skill had its place, every labourer his rhythm, and together they wove the vast fabric of empire. And yet, beneath it all, Rome remained deeply human. Deeply human. For even in the swing of a hammer, the tilling of soil, the chant of marching feet, there was not only duty, but pride, necessity, and the quiet dignity of shaping the world with one's own hand. So let us step into this other Rome, not of marble facades and gilded halls, but of sweat and dust, iron and earth, discipline and endurance. Here we will walk among craftsmen and builders, farmers and soldiers, slaves and merchants, the ones whose unseen labour gave Rome its enduring life. The city wakes with sound, not only the chatter of markets, but the deeper heartbeat of labour. In shadowed workshops, men stoop over anvils, hammer meeting metal with a rhythm that feels almost like breath. The clang and spark of iron fill the morning air, and the blacksmith wipes his brow as firelight paints his face in gold. Here are chisel chips at marble, dust drifting slowly, a soft cloud caught in sunbeams. The sculptor's hand, steady and worn, traces muscles in stone, giving form to gods, emperors, and heroes. Each strike is small, yet each carries patience enough to outlast centuries. Woodworkers' plane beams, smooth, the scent of fresh-cut timber rising like incense. From rough planks they craft doors, carts, furniture, objects touched daily, often overlooked, yet quietly shaping Roman life. The scrape of blade on wood, the thud of mallet against joinery becomes a soft chorus in the city's streets. And then there are the masons, those who raise Rome's very skeleton. Stone by stone, arch by arch by arch, they lift aqueducts across valleys, bridges over rivers, walls around the empire's beating heart. Their voices call out, measured and sure as ropes pull, as scaffolds sway, as limestone blocks settle into place with a hollow thud that seems eternal. Ships, too, are born beneath Roman hands. Along the Tiber's banks, saw and hammer echo on wooden hulls. Tar and pitch cling to the air, ropes coil like sleeping snakes, and men walk barefoot on planks, testing the strength of beams. When a ship finally slides into the water, there is a moment of quiet awe, for now it belongs to the river, to the sea, to commerce and war alike. Rome's craftsmen live in this rhythm. Their backs bend, their hands harden, their ears grow used to endless sound. Yet from their toil rises beauty, arches that will outlast kingdoms, tools that ease daily burdens, vessels that carry grain and wine from distant shores. In the soft haze of labour, you can almost feel the warmth of their forges, the sting of stone dust in your nose, the resinous scent of fresh timber. Each craft has its music, hammer, saw, chisel, mallet, and together they weave a quiet hymn of industry. Rome did not rise in silence. It rose in the noise of work, the breath of countless craftsmen, the steady shaping of matter into form. And though their names are forgotten, their creations whisper still in every fallen column, every weathered mosaic, every ruined arch that catches the sun. Beyond the marble city, beyond the hum of hammers and chisels, Rome breathes in the countryside. Here, in rolling fields and olive groves, farmers bend at dawn, their shadows long in the mist. The air smells of earth and dew, of tilled soil turned under wooden ploughs, and of grain waiting for harvest. Oripant! The farmer's ox moves slowly, its hooves pressing dark prints into the damp ground. A plough creaks behind it, guided by calloused hands that know the land's moods. This rhythm has not changed in centuries. The crack of whip in the air, the soft grunt of animal breath, the groan of soil opening beneath the blade. And when the furrows are made, seed scatters like small prayers, grains of hope cast into the earth. For the vineyards, the labour is gentler yet no less constant. Vines coil upward on wooden stakes, their leaves trembling in the morning breeze. Workers prune, tying tendrils, their fingers sticky with sap. Later, during harvest, baskets brim with grapes, purple and green, the scent of sweetness clinging to skin and cloth. Wine presses creak, and streams of juice run like rivers of ruby, promising warmth for winter feasts. Among the groves, olive pickers climb ladders, their baskets filling with green and black fruit. The press crushes them slowly, and oil seeps forth, thick, golden, gleaming in the sun. It will flavour bread, anoint altars, and burn in lamps that will glow long into Roman nights. Labour is not only in fields, it is also in the camps where Rome's soldiers train and march. The clang of weapons, the bark of commands, the steady rhythm of feet upon packed earth, all remind one that Rome's peace is guarded by war. In the camp, tents form neat rows, a small city of canvas and order. Fires burn low, blackened pots simmer with lentils and grain, and armour glimmers in firelight as men polish their shields. The sound of whetstones scraping against blades fills the quiet dusk, a reminder that tomorrow, and the day after, the legions must always be ready. In the fields and in the camps alike, Rome's lifeblood flows. The farmer feeds the city. The soldier guards the fields. Together, they sustained the empire. Even slaves bend to this labour, their hands bleeding in vineyards, their backs bowed beneath sacks of grain, their bodies carrying the weight of an empire that rarely calls their names. And yet their sweat becomes bread, their toil becomes wine, their endurance becomes Rome itself. Stand here in the hush of evening, as a farmer drives his oxen home, as smoke curls from campfires in the distance. You will see Rome not in monuments, but in dust clinging to sandals, in tools leaning against walls, in calluses hard as stone. For empire is not only marble and glory, it is the ceaseless labour of hands, known and unknown, that kept its vast heart beating. The sun lowers behind tiled rooftops, and Rome exhales. Workshops close their shutters, the clang of hammer and chisel fading into silence. Ash cools in forges, sawdust settles in still air, and stone dust clings to the edges of lantern light. The city softens, its noise slipping into murmurs, its rhythm slowing to a tired heartbeat. Along the fields, farmers guide their oxen home. The day's furrows lie quiet, dark lines across the earth, waiting for rain or seed. Tools lean against walls, ploughs rest heavy and unused, and the smell of cut grain drifts gently in the evening breeze. Men wash their hands in cool water, the dirt of the day swirling away as stars begin to rise above the hills. In the vineyards, baskets stand empty, the last grapes pressed, the air still sweet with their scent. Workers sit on low walls sharing bread, cheese and wine drawn fresh from jars. Laughter is soft, low as the crickets in the grass. Soon they too will drift into sleep, their bodies heavy with toil, their dreams as simple as rest itself. Farther off in the soldiers' camp, the order of the day falls into quiet. Armour is stacked neatly beside bedrolls, shields lean against wooden posts. Fires burn low, casting long shadows across canvas tents. Some men murmur prayers to Mars or Jupiter, others sharpen blades by starlight, while a few hum songs from distant homelands. And then slowly silence takes the camp, broken only by the distant call of a night watchman and the rustle of wind through banners. Even slaves exhausted find a corner of darkness to rest. Their chains clink softly as they settle, but in sleep for a few brief hours their burden lightens. Dreams come, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel, but always welcome, for in dreams they are no longer carrying Rome on their backs, and the city itself, that vast breathing body of stone, water and fire, also drifts into its night. Lanterns glow faintly in narrow alleys, their light trembling against walls. The Tiber whispers against its banks, catching the silver of the moon. Somewhere in the Subura, a tavern still rings with laughter, but even that sound grows hushed, folded into the soft blanket of darkness. Rome, mighty Rome, rests at last. The hands that carved, that ploughed, that marched, that served, they fall still. And in the hush of night, with stars overhead and lamps guttering low, the city dreams. Dreams of arches yet unbuilt, fields yet unploughed, roads yet untravelled, battles yet unfought. But for now, only silence, only stillness, only the deep and endless breath of sleep. The story of Rome is also the story of its roads. They stretch like ribbons of stone across hills and valleys, binding together distant lands, tying provinces to the beating heart of the city. Follow them and you follow Rome itself, its armies, its merchants, its couriers and travellers, all moving to the steady rhythm of paved stone. At dawn, the road glimmers faintly with dew. Carts creak into motion, wheels groaning as oxen pull their weight. Merchants balance baskets of figs and oil, their sandals scuffing dust into the morning air. Messengers ride swiftly, the clatter of hooves echoing down long, straight paths, carrying letters sealed with wax, promises written in ink, orders that shape distant lives. These roads are marvels of order. Layer upon layer of gravel, stone and mortar make them strong enough to last centuries. They cut across rivers with bridges, over mountains with passes, through forests with steady patience. Milestones rise along the edges, telling weary travellers how far they have come and how far they have yet to go. Even now, long after Rome has fallen, many of these roads still lie where they were laid, their stones worn smooth by the countless feet and hooves that once passed over them. Walk upon them and you walk with history. Legionaries once marched here, their shields glinting in sunlight, their sandals striking stone in perfect unison. Merchants led caravans heavy with grain, wine and spices, their voices calling in many tongues. Pilgrims made their way to temples, their offerings clutched close, their prayers whispered with each step. And sometimes a traveller with no more than a pack and a dream would wander into the unknown, trusting the road to carry him where fate might lead. The road was more than a path. It was a promise that Rome was near, that its power reached even the most distant village, that no matter how far you wandered, you remained within its grasp. And so, in the warmth of day, we see the road alive with motion. The creak of wagons, the shouts of mule drivers, the jingling of harnesses, the steady shuffle of sandals. Dust rises in the sunlight. The air smells of leather, sweat and hay, and the horizon always stretches onward, pulling the traveller farther and farther toward the heart of empire. As the sun leans westward, the road itself begins to change. The morning's bustle fades into the slower rhythm of long journeys. Travellers look ahead, searching for shelter, their eyes scanning for the low roofs of mansions, the roadside inns that dot the empire like beads on a thread. These places are rough, yet welcome. The weary traveller ties his mule to a post, dust clinging to his tunic, and steps inside where firelight flickers on plastered walls. A wooden table waits, bread laid out coarse and thick, a jug of sour wine poured without question. The innkeeper's voice is gruff, but the warmth of the hearth and the promise of a bed of straw feel like luxury after miles of stone. Along the great roads, too, stand the mutations, simple way stations where horses are kept ready, and couriers of the imperial post stop here only briefly, changing mounts, drinking a mouthful of water, and then riding on at a gallop, for their duty is urgent. Through these swift messengers, Rome breathes across distances, its orders flying faster than armies could march, yet not all roads are safe. In the forests that edged the Appian Way, bandits wait with silent patience. A merchant's cart might be stopped suddenly, the night broken by shouts and steel. Thus travellers often go in groups, seeking the safety of numbers, their footsteps echoing together in twilight. Soldiers too patrol these ways, their presence a reminder that peace, like the roads themselves, is built by discipline and watchfulness. And then there is the night journey. Picture it, a caravan still moving beneath the stars, its torches flickering, its wheels groaning low in the dark. Oil lamps swing from carts, casting long, trembling shadows on the stones. The air is cool now, and the silence of fields stretches wide, broken only by the clop of hooves and the rustle of cloth in the wind. Somewhere an owl calls, and the Tiber, unseen in the dark, murmurs softly in its endless flow. Sea travel, too, joins these roads. At ports like Ostia, where the stoneway meets the rolling waves, cargo shifts from cart to ship, from cart to ship. Grain pours into holds like sand into an hourglass, amphorae clink as they are stacked, and sails rise into the wind. Here Rome's lifelines stretch farther still to Africa's fields, to Greece's harbours, to Spain's mines. The roads do not end at the sea, they only transform, becoming watery paths that carry empire outward. And so the roads of Rome, dusty, worn but steady, were not only stones laid upon stones, they were threads in a great web, binding farmer to city, soldier to emperor, province to capital. By day they rang with footsteps and wheels, by night they glowed with lanternlight and starlight, and always they whispered the same promise, that Rome was everywhere, and everywhere Rome endured. And when at last the traveller lay down to sleep in a roadside inn, the road itself seemed to breathe outside, resting, waiting, ready to carry countless more footsteps when dawn returned. Trade in Rome was more than the exchange of goods. It was the breath of empire. From the deserts of Africa to the forests of Gaul, from the silk-laden caravans of the East to the grain ships heavy with Egypt's harvest, everything flowed toward Rome, as rivers flow to the sea. Beprata. Step into the Forum Boarium, the bustling cattle market by the Tiber, and the air fills with the lowing of oxen, the bleating of sheep, the calls of drovers urging their beasts along. Coins clink in purses, hands clap in agreement, and beneath it all lies the earthy smell of animals and hay. Walk a little farther, and you find the Forum Holatorium, where vegetables and herbs are sold in heaps. The colours are vivid, greens of cabbages, reds of radishes, the soft purples of figs stacked in woven baskets. Women haggle over prices, their voices rising above the din, while children chase each other between the stalls, laughing as vendors call out their wares. Beyond the markets of the city lie the harbours. At Ostia, Rome's great port, the sea itself becomes a marketplace. Here ships crowd the docks, their sails furled, their hulls groaning with cargo. Grain pours from sacks in a golden stream, wine jars clatter as they are loaded, and amphorae of oil gleam in the sun. The air is thick with salt, tar and fish, and the cries of sailors echo across the water. Trade was not only survival, it was spectacle. Exotic goods dazzled Roman eyes, silks from China, spices from India, ivory from Africa, amber from the cold seas of the north. Each carried stories of distant lands, mysteries whispered into Roman homes. A woman might hold a silk scarf and wonder at the hands that wove it across deserts she would never see. A man might sip cinnamon-scented wine and dream of ships rocking on waves beyond the world he knew. And always, at the heart of it all, stood the coin. Denarii and sestertii passed from palm to palm, bright discs of silver and bronze carrying the emperor's face. They were not only money, they were trust, they were power, they were Rome stamped into metal. Here in the marketplace, the empire breathed its most human breath. Bakers sold bread still warm from ovens, fishermen lifted their catches high in the morning sun, potters set out rows of jars, whose curves echoed the shapes of amphorae that crossed the sea. Voices rose in 1,000 tones, Latin, Greek, Aramaic, Egyptian, Gallic, a chorus of tongues bound together by trade, in every coin that changed hands, in every cart that rattled across cobblestones, in every sail that caught the wind, Rome's vast heart pulsed with life. Beyond the city's noise and bustle, the roads and seas extend like veins, carrying goods farther than most Romans could ever dream. To the east, caravans move slowly across the desert, their camels swaying with patient rhythm. Bales of silk, bundles of spices, precious stones wrapped in cloth, all tied tightly to saddles, all guarded by men who know that the sands conceal danger as well as beauty. The desert wind blows hot, the air dry as ash, but the caravan presses onward, each footstep a promise of profit, each mile a link binding Rome to the mysteries of Asia. By the time these goods reach the Mediterranean, their value has grown like myth. A silk veil, light as air, might cost a fortune, yet in Rome, a patrician matron will drape it across her shoulders with pride, thinking little of the weary footsteps that carried it so far. On the seas, the journey is quicker, but no less perilous. Ships bound from Alexandria swell with grain, their holds stacked high with sacks that will feed Rome's countless mouths. But out on the open water, pirates lurk. Their swift vessels cut across the waves, crews hardened by hunger and daring. A merchant ship, heavy with cargo, is an irresistible prize, thus fleets sail together, and sometimes soldiers stand watch on deck, their eyes sharp against the horizon. Still, the sea carries more than danger. It carries life. From Spain comes olive oil, poured into amphorae sealed with pitch. From Gaul comes honey sweet and thick. From Africa, ivory gleams pale as moonlight. Each arrival at Ostia, each unloading at the quays of Puteoli or Massilia, feeds not only Rome's body, but its imagination. And behind the movement of ships and caravans, behind the clatter of markets, lie the quiet figures of the money changers. In shaded stalls at the edge of the forum, they sit behind wooden tables, coins spread before them like stars. Their fingers are quick, testing the weight of silver, listening for the ring of bronze, measuring value with a practiced glance. A merchant with Greek drachmas, a traveller with Syrian tetradrachms, a soldier returning with spoils of war, all pass through these hands, their foreign coins transformed into Roman denarii. Bankers, too, play their part. Behind heavy doors, they keep accounts on wax tablets, recording loans, debts, and fortunes. A farmer might borrow to plant his fields, a shipmaster to repair his hull, a senator to fund a grand spectacle. Commerce is not only goods, but trust, risk, and the delicate dance of numbers. And so the empire hums with commerce, across deserts where the wind sings low, across seas that glitter under moonlight, across counting houses where scribes murmur to themselves. Rome stretches its hands outward, gathering the wealth of the world. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the steady murmur of it all. The groan of camel saddles, the creak of rigging in the wind, the shuffle of coins across a table. It is a lullaby of movement, a dreamy hymn of exchange, an endless flow that, like the Tiber itself, carries everything toward Rome. And when night falls over the city, when the markets close and ships rest in harbour, the goods remain. Olive oil stored in cool cellars, spices tucked into jars, cloth folded neatly in chests. They wait, patient and silent, for morning to return, for trade to stir again, for the great machine of empire to draw another breath. In the early morning, before the markets fully stir and before the forum begins to ring with voices, another quieter sound fills the Roman city. The voices of children, repeating their letters aloud. The Roman home was the first classroom, begins. A mother would guide her child's earliest words. A father might teach him the names of gods and ancestors. But soon the child was sent to the ludus, the little school. Here, on low wooden benches, children of citizens sat in rows, wax tablets balanced on their knees, styly scratching faintly as they traced their lessons. The literator, the elementary teacher, was not always wealthy nor honoured, but he held the keys to knowledge. His voice filled the room with the chant of the alphabet, B, C, recited in the old order of Latin letters. The children repeated, their tones rising and falling like waves on the shore. Mistakes were corrected with a stern word or sometimes the tap of a rod, but mostly with patience, for the teacher's duty was to awaken young minds. The wax tablet was a child's constant companion. Its surface could be smoothed and written again, lessons repeated day by day until memory held them. First came letters, then syllables, then whole words. The children read passages from poets, Homer in Greek, Virgil in Latin, their young voices carrying verses that had been sung for centuries. As they grew, some left schooling behind. For many, the basics of reading, writing and counting were enough. Useful for trade, for household affairs, for reading a legal notice or writing a simple letter. But for the sons of wealth, the path continued. They entered the care of the grammaticus, a teacher of literature and language. Here the lessons deepened. The boys sat in courtyards shaded by vines, scrolls unrolled before them, as the grammaticus spoke of grammar, of style, of the subtle differences between the words of Cicero and the rhythms of Horace. They learned not only to read, but to savour. A phrase was not just sound, but music. A word was not just meaning, but power. Girls too could be taught, especially in noble households. While they were not expected to enter public life, many were trained to read poetry, to write letters, to converse with wit and grace. A Roman matron might preside over a salon of learned friends, her knowledge a quiet strength, her voice part of the cultivated life of the home. Discipline was strict, yet within it was a certain warmth. The daily rhythm of recitation, the quiet scratch of stylus on wax, the hush of children leaning over scrolls by lamplight. Education in Rome was not only about knowledge. It was about shaping the mind, shaping the tongue, shaping the very presence of a future citizen. At midday, when lessons ended, children spilled back into the streets, the echo of their teacher's voice still lingering in their ears. They carried their tablets tucked under their arms, their minds heavy with letters, their futures slowly being carved by the patience of each day. For in Rome to be educated was not simply to know. It was to belong, to speak with eloquence in the forum, to write with elegance in correspondence, to honour the traditions of ancestors. And so, in the quiet shade of schools, in the bustling chatter of boys and girls, Rome prepared its next generation, not with loud spectacle, but with a steady murmur of lessons. As the Roman boy grew into a young man, the lessons of childhood gave way to deeper study. No longer content with syllables and verses alone, he now entered the realm of rhetoric and philosophy, where words became weapons and ideas companions for a lifetime. The rhetor, master of speech, was the next guide. He gathered his pupils in porticos or in shaded colonnades near the forum, and there he taught them the craft of persuasion, for Rome was a world where the tongue could rule as strongly as the sword. A young Roman of noble family was expected to speak in court, to argue laws, to plead cases before the Senate. The rhetor drilled them endlessly. How to structure an argument, how to stir pity with a pause, how to rouse anger with a single sharp phrase, how to sway the hearts of a restless crowd. The practice of declamatio filled their days. The teacher posed a case, perhaps a son accused of betraying his father, perhaps a city at war debating its fate, and the student must rise, his heart pounding, to deliver words as though the world depended on them. The classmates listened, sometimes with laughter, sometimes with admiration, always with the tension of rivalry. Each sought to polish his voice, his gestures, his very presence, until he might stand one day in the forum itself, a senator or advocate, his words echoing against the marble walls. But rhetoric was not enough. Rome had absorbed the wisdom of Greece, and the young Roman of ambition might study philosophy. Here, beneath colonnades or in quiet gardens, he listened to teachers who spoke of virtue, of reason, of the gods, of reason of the gods. The Stoics taught that the world was ordered, that the wise man must master his passions and walk calmly through fortune and misfortune alike. The Epicureans whispered another path, not the pursuit of wild pleasures, but of quiet contentment, a life lived in friendship, in moderation, in peace of the mind. Some Romans laughed at philosophy, calling it idle talk, unsuited to the hard, practical life of politics. But others found in it a lantern in the darkness, guidance in grief, calm in uncertainty, a sense that beyond the marble and noise of Rome was a deeper harmony. And then there were the libraries, temples not of gods, but of knowledge. In Rome, libraries were built within porticos and baths, their halls cooled with marble, their walls lined with shelves. Scroll upon scroll rested in niches, each one a silent voice of ages past. To enter was to step into a dream of countless minds. Here were the histories of Livy, the philosophy of Plato, the poetry of Catullus and Ovid, the speeches of Cicero, the vast epics of Homer and Virgil. The reader unrolled the papyrus scroll carefully, its crackle faint as parchment yielded its words. The letters, dark against the pale surface, seemed to breathe once more, summoning voices long silent. Scholars gathered in corners, arguing softly about lines of verse, or puzzling over the precise turn of a phrase. Young men copied passages diligently, wax tablets balanced on their knees, or sent slaves to take down dictation. To wander a Roman library was to feel time itself stretch out. The air was heavy with the scent of parchment, the faint dust of papyrus, the oil from lamps burning steadily in alcoves. Each scroll a world, each word a thread binding Rome not only to its present, but to centuries before and after. And above all was the sense that learning was not just for knowledge. It was for life. To shape the citizen, to guide the magistrate, to steady the soul of the philosopher, to comfort the poet. When evening fell, students left their teachers, their minds still humming with words. They walked past the glowing baths, past the murmuring taverns, carrying scrolls tucked under their arms, hearts alive with questions that would last a lifetime. For Rome in its golden age did not only build roads, aqueducts and temples. It built minds restless, curious, eager to speak and to dream. And so, in the hush of study, in the murmur of rhetoric, in the whisper of scrolls unrolled beneath lamplight, Rome found another empire, not of stone or iron, but of knowledge, woven across generations, lasting beyond the fall of walls and kingdoms. In the stillness of early dawn, as Rome stretched and yawned awake, the marble forum stood waiting. Its columns glowed faintly with the first rays of sun, the statues of old generals and founders seemed to stir, and the spaces between paving stones still held the coolness of night. Soon, the footsteps of senators, clients, and citizens would begin to fill these ancient stones, weaving together the daily rhythm of Roman politics. Politics in Rome was not merely the business of law. It was theatre, it was ritual, it was a constant negotiation of honour and ambition. To be a Roman of standing meant to live in the gaze of others, to seek office not only for power but for dignity, for memory, for one's name to be carried forward through generations. A young nobleman, born into the hopes of his family, might dream from childhood of walking the cursus honorum, the ladder of offices that carried him from small beginnings to the heights of power. It began with the quaestorship, where he managed finances, learned the weight of coin and account. From there he might seek the aedileship, where he oversaw the city's markets, roads and festivals, earning popularity with spectacles and games. Then came the praetorship, with the solemn duty of justice, the authority to judge disputes and shape the law. And above all, the summit, the consulship, the pinnacle of ambition, where two men together held the highest power of the republic, guiding armies, presiding over senate, commanding the attention of the world. Each step was hard won. Campaigns for office filled the streets with handshakes and promises. Clients clustered around their patrons, escorting them through the forum, whispering support, spreading influence. Coins were spent, favours exchanged, speeches delivered in ringing tones beneath the porticos. To lose was humiliation. To win was the sweetest triumph of all. A triumph not with laurel crowns and chariots, but with the steady rise of one's name in the rolls of Roman history. The Senate itself was a living heart of power. Here, in the Curia, voices rose and fell beneath the high roof. Senators draped in white togas with broad purple stripes debated war and peace, taxes and treaties. Some spoke with fire, striking the air with their hands. Others murmured in low, careful tones, weaving webs of persuasion. Always, there was the weight of tradition, the echo of ancestors whose portraits lined the atriums of noble houses, urging their descendants never to falter. But politics was not only lofty, it was also daily and ordinary, woven into the life of every Roman. In the mornings, patrons opened their doors to clients, men of lower status who came to greet them, to show loyalty, to ask for favours. The salutatio, the morning greeting, was a ritual of politics in miniature. A nod here, a promise there, a reminder of debts both material and personal. The patron offered protection and sometimes coin, the client repaid with support, with applause at speeches, with loyalty in elections. Thus the great machine of Roman power turned, greased by obligation and expectation. The people, the plebs, too, were part of this grand dance. Their voices, gathered in assemblies, could make or break careers. Tribunes of the plebs, with the sacred right of veto, stood as guardians of their will, sometimes clashing fiercely with the Senate, sometimes yielding, sometimes rising to heroic stature in the defence of the common man. A single shout from a tribune, veto, could halt the machinery of government, like a sudden silence in a crowded room. And above politics, looming like a shadow and a promise, was always the army. To command legions was to hold the loyalty of thousands, to bring victories back to Rome, to earn the right to a triumphal procession through the streets. Many a general returned from distant wars not just with spoils, but with ambition burning, ambition that sometimes spilled into civil strife, tearing at the republic itself. Yet even amid rivalry, ambition and corruption, there was ceremony, dignity, the sense that Rome's politics was something greater than its individuals. Laws were inscribed on bronze tablets, placed in the forum for all to see. Speeches were preserved, copied, read in libraries long after the speaker was gone. Statues were raised, arches built, coins struck with the names of those who held power, binding their memory to the very fabric of the city. As evening fell on the forum, and the crowd slowly dispersed, the marble once again grew quiet. Senators walked home with their entourages, their togas now heavy with the dust of the day. Patrons dismissed their clients. For the lamps were lit in the houses of the powerful, where new strategies were whispered over dinner, and young heirs listened, wide-eyed, to the voices of fathers and uncles, learning the ways of influence. Politics in Rome never truly slept. Even in the hush of night, beneath the oil lamps and the watchful stars, ambition stirred. For power in Rome was not only an office, not only authority. It was a way of life, a dream of immortality, etched not just in stone and law, but in the very memory of the city. The heartbeat of Rome was not only in its marble forums or its bustling markets. It pulsed also in the steady tramp of soldiers' boots, in the shimmer of polished shields beneath the sun, in the long, endless roads where legions marched toward distant horizons. Rome's greatness was born, again and again, on the backs of its soldiers, from the earliest days when the city was only a cluster of huts by the Tiber to the golden age when emperors ruled from palaces. The army was both protector and instrument of destiny. To be a soldier was to surrender comfort for discipline, to trade the warmth of home for the endless drill of the camp. Each day began with the blare of the trumpet, the call that echoed across tents lined in perfect rows. For the legionary rose, tightened his belt, strapped on his heavy armour, and prepared for duties that never ended. The camp itself was a marvel of Roman order. Wherever an army halted, engineers laid out a square with precise geometry. Streets at right angles, a central headquarters, barracks for the men, a wall of ditch and palisade raised in astonishing speed. By nightfall, even in hostile lands, a Roman force lived as if within a miniature city, disciplined and secure. The legion was the soul of the military. Around 5,000 men, divided into cohorts and centuries, each commanded by officers whose voices carried over the clash of drills. The legionaries' equipment was simple but ingenious. The rectangular scutum shield, the short stabbing gladius, the heavy javelin or pilum designed to bend on impact, robbing the enemy of weapons while Rome pressed forward. Each man carried not only arms but tools, spades, stakes, axes, for a Roman army was as much a machine of building as of battle. Marching was its lifeblood. 20 miles in a day, packs heavy with gear, dust rising beneath sandals, songs and chants keeping pace. Along the roads Rome herself had built, the legions stretched like rivers of iron, flowing ever outward, into Gaul, into Greece, into Africa, into the misty isles of Britain. And conquest was not merely violence, it was transformation. Wherever soldiers went, they left behind roads, forts, bridges, colonies. Towns grew around their camps, markets thrived where once were fields. Rome extended itself like a vast web, each thread spun by the step of a soldier. In battle, the discipline of Rome was terrible to behold. The line advanced with shields locked, a wall of bronze and wood. Pilums flew, striking shields and armour. Then the legionaries closed, gladius flashing in short, deadly thrusts. They fought not as individuals, but as one great creature, flexing, reforming, absorbing shock, striking back with unrelenting rhythm. Many foes, brave and fierce, were broken not by numbers alone, but by the relentless patience of the Roman way. Yet the soldier's life was not only glory. It was mud, hunger, wounds, the ache of long campaigns, the silence of foreign nights when home seemed another world. Veterans bore scars and memories, sometimes rewarded with land, sometimes forgotten. But they knew in their marrow that they had been part of something vast, an empire stitched together by their sweat, their courage, their obedience. And so the Roman military was more than an army, it was a way of being. It taught discipline to citizens, spread Rome's laws and customs, built the skeleton of empire. When senators debated, when merchants traded, when poets sang, all knew their peace was guarded by the legion's shadow. As the sun set over distant frontiers, tents glowed with lamplight, fires flickered, and the murmurs of men at rest filled the cool air. Some polished their armour, some wrote letters on wax tablets, others shared bread and laughter. The day closed, but the long march of Rome never truly ended. For as long as legions stood, the empire breathed. When the march ended for the day, and the signal was given, the work of building a temporary city began. Soldiers dropped their packs, but rest did not come at once. Each man knew his duty, to dig ditches, to raise palisades, to stake down the gates of the marching camp. The rhythm was practiced, like the beat of a drum. Within hours a fortress stood, square and orderly, with streets aligned, headquarters in the centre, barracks and tents stretched neatly to the sides. Inside, life unfolded with its own rhythm, the clatter of dice from soldiers at leisure. The murmurs of men writing letters home, their wax tablets glowing under oil lamps. The sharp smell of leather as armour was repaired, the steady scrape of a whetstone against a gladius. Meals were simple, bread, porridge, salted pork, but shared with comrades they felt like feasts. Discipline shaped every moment. A centurion's voice could cut through laughter in an instant, pulling men back to drills, to formation practice, to the endless repetition that made them unbreakable in battle. Punishments were harsh, lashes, extra labour, even death for cowardice. Yet within this iron structure was also brotherhood. a bond that grew strong in the long silence of watch duty, in the shared ache of tired feet, in the comfort of knowing that each man's shield protected the one beside him. At night, sentries walked the ramparts, their silhouettes dark against the firelit sky. Beyond the ditch, shadows moved, but within, the camp breathed steadily, a small ordered island in a vast, uncertain world. Part 3. Great Conquests and Generals. Rome's empire was written not only by soldiers, but by the men who led them. There was Scipio Africanus, who broke the might of Carthage at Zama, turning the tide of Rome's destiny. There was Julius Caesar, whose campaigns in Gaul stretched Rome's reach to the edge of the known world, whose commentaries still whisper of rivers crossed, tribes subdued, victories won, with a mixture of boldness and calculation. There was Trajan, the soldier emperor, who pushed the frontiers to their widest bridges spanning the Danube, armies pressing into Dacia's rugged hills. Each general left more than battlefields. They brought triumphal processions, chariots rolling through Rome, captives in chains, treasures glittering in the sunlight, crowds roaring as the conquering hero mounted the Capitol to offer thanks to Jupiter. The stones of Rome absorbed these moments, etched them into arches and columns, into stories told by poets and carved in reliefs for generations to gaze upon. But conquest was not only triumph, it was loss. The Teutoburg forest swallowed legions whole, their eagles lost in the mist. Parthian arrows cut through Roman armour in deserts far from home. The empire's borders were never without danger, and victory often came only at the price of countless unnamed lives. Still, the soldiers marched, and Rome grew like a great shadow stretching from the Atlantic to the sands of Arabia, from the Nile to the misty moors of Britannia. Part 4. The soldier's quiet night and legacy when battle was done, when the trumpet no longer called men to arms, and a veteran laid aside his armour for the last time, the life of the soldier drifted into quiet memory. Some were rewarded with land, settling colonies where new towns rose. Fields once wild now bore wheat, olive trees, vineyards, tended by hands that had once grasped swords. Others returned to Rome, to the bustle of the city, to tell stories by lamplight of campaigns long past. The soldier's shadow remained in every stone road, every aqueduct arching across valleys, every market that hummed with goods from distant lands. For it was through the toil of soldiers that Rome had stretched its hand across the world. And at night, as fires burned low in the last camps along the frontiers, and men curled into cloaks against the cold, the empire itself seemed to dream. Dream of legions that had come and gone, of roads that stretched into silence, of a power that once seemed eternal. The soldier, weary and scarred, closed his eyes beneath the stars, knowing his watch was ending, but the story of Rome would march on. Part 1. The cracks in the marble. Every empire begins with strength, with dreams that feel unbreakable. Rome was no different. Its roads ran straight as the rays of the sun, its armies stood like iron walls, its markets hummed with the wealth of 100 nations. And yet, beneath the marble, cracks began to show. The empire grew vast, so vast that one man, one senate, could no longer guide it with ease. Frontiers stretched into forests and deserts, where soldiers fought endless wars against unseen tribes. Treasuries grew heavy with taxes, burdening farmers who once fed the heart of Rome. The Senate, once proud, lost its voice to emperors who rose and fell with dizzying speed. There was still grandeur, still triumphs, still golden light falling on the forum. But in the shadows, something fragile stirred, a sense that the eternal might not be eternal after all. Part 2. The restless borders at the edges of Rome. The frontier grew restless. From the forests of Germania came tribes, restless and strong, pushing against the lines, the long line of forts and watchtowers. From the steppes came the Huns, swift as the wind, riding horses that seemed never to tire. In the east, Persia loomed, a rival as old as memory itself, always testing, always pressing against the legions. Inside the empire, armies that once marched together now turned on one another. Civil wars bled the land. Generals declared themselves emperors, their loyalty given to ambition rather than Rome. The eagle standards, once symbols of unity, fluttered under rival banners. And still, in the great cities, life went on. Children played in courtyards, vendors sold figs and honeycakes, philosophers spoke in shaded porticos. But beyond the walls, storms gathered. Part 3. The division and the fall to manage the weight of empire. Rome was divided. East and West, two halves of a once whole. The east, with Constantinople gleaming by the Bosporus, grew strong, its walls high, its trade routes alive with silks and spices. The West, with Rome and Ravenna, grew weary, its land scarred, its coffers thin. In the West, one by one, provinces slipped away. Britannia abandoned, its legions recalled, Gaul broken into fragments, Spain lost to new kings. Italy itself felt the tremor, as Gothic warriors walked roads once trod by Caesar. And then, in a year whispered by history, 476, the last Western emperor, Romulus Augustulus, laid aside his crown. No trumpet sounded, no grand ceremony marked the end. It was quiet, like the last ember fading in a long burning fire. Rome had not been destroyed in a single blow. It had simply changed, its power slipping like sand through open fingers. Part 4, the dreaming ruins, yet Rome never truly died. Even as its palaces crumbled, its stones became the bones of new homes, its roads carried footsteps of pilgrims and traders, its aqueducts, though broken, still guided streams. In monasteries tucked away in hills, scribes bent over parchment, copying old texts, saving voices of Cicero, of Virgil, of Aristotle, so that the wisdom of centuries would not vanish into silence. Travellers walked among the ruins, their voices hushed, marvelling at the arches that still rose, the colosseums that still stood against the wind, and in their hearts grew a longing to rebuild, to remember, to carry something of Rome forward. So the dream of Rome flowed on, into Byzantium, into the kingdoms of Europe, into every law written, every road built, every language shaped by Latin's echo. Even now, in our own age, we feel Rome's shadow. In the stones of cities, in the words we speak, in the stories we tell when night grows still. And so, the empire rests, not vanished, but sleeping like ruins beneath the moonlight. The twilight of Rome was not an end, but a turning, a soft breath, a whisper that lingers across centuries. Epilogue, the dream of Rome, and so, our long wandering through Rome comes to a close. We have walked its streets at dawn, when merchants called and fountains sang. We have stood in the glow of its temples, heard the roar of its games, watched shadows stretch across marble forums. We have entered quiet homes where lamps flickered and families whispered their prayers. We have followed soldiers on dusty roads, sailors across the wide, restless sea, and scribes through the halls of learning. We have seen its grandeur. Arches that reached for the heavens, baths that shimmered with steam, gardens heavy with roses, theatres alive with laughter. And we have seen its silence, ruins beneath the moonlight, roads that fade into the hills, a crown set aside with no one to lift it again. Rome rose like the morning sun, blazed at its height, and drifted slowly into twilight. But in truth, it never vanished. It lingers, woven into our words, our cities, our laws, our dreams. Now, as you close your eyes, let the echo of Rome drift with you. Hear the faint splash of a fountain, the soft murmur of voices in a forum long gone, the hush of sandals on stone streets that no longer carry their crowds. The empire sleeps, and so may you, for history itself is a dream, and tonight Rome is the dream you carry with you into the quiet.